Chapter 1392. Death. Qin Feiyang murmured. He raised his arm and punched. The terrifying power poured out, twisting the void. Boom. But in the end, he was no match for Zhuge Xingfeng. He was slapped down by Zhuge Xingfeng's claw and smashed into the mountains below. His arm was also lacerated. Blood and flesh flew everywhere. Qin Feiyang was dumbfounded. Ever since he ate the divine meat of the Lion King, he had never lost to anyone in the same realm in terms of physical strength. This was the first time. Eating the meat of a divine beast is just a... Zhuge Xingfeng stood in the sky and laughed. Then, he rushed toward Qin Feiyang with a monstrous aura. Beast transformation, blood dragon. Qin Feiyang's eyes flashed. Whoosh. The next moment, he slammed his palm on the ground and rushed up in an instant. Flaming battle chi appeared and gathered in his palm. You don't know what death is. Zhuge Xingfeng's face was full of contempt. The dragon claw whistled. Qin Feiyang spat out a mouthful of blood and smashed into the ground again. Dust flew everywhere. Furthermore, those sharp claws left a shocking wound on his body that was so deep that his bones could be seen. The purple-gold dragon blood gushed out like a small stream. However, to Qin Feiyang, these injuries were nothing at all. He stared at Zhuge Xingfeng with a trace of horror in his eyes. This was a divine art. Moreover, this beast form gave Zhuge Xingfeng a very strong defense and attack power. Qin Feiyang, is this all you've got? Be destroyed. Zhuge Xingfeng laughed wildly. The blood and qi in his body surged and turned into a blood-red wave. It carried the power to destroy the world and blasted toward Qin Feiyang. I was just testing the power of your divine art. Why are you so arrogant? Qin Feiyang suddenly stood up and smiled disdainfully. The life force contained in the fire of life and the purple-gold dragon blood was quickly healing his wounds. Boom. He raised his hand and waved it. A golden light surged out like a torrent and collided with the wave of blood. Immediately, the blood qi spun in the air and instantly engulfed Zhuge Xingfeng. Return formula. Give him a taste of his own medicine. Ah! Zhuge Xingfeng struggled and roared in the blood waves. His entire body was drenched in blood. The dragon's scales were completely shattered. Qin Feiyang sneered, how does it feel to be injured by your own moves? Don't celebrate too early. Zhuge Xingfeng roared. Following closely, a mighty divine aura rushed out from the blood waves. The blood wave instantly collapsed. Zhuge Xingfeng appeared in front of Qin Feiyang. Although he was covered in wounds, the murderous aura he exuded was no less than before. The first style of the blood dragon art, torrential blood waves. He waved his dragon claw, and a wave of blood that was even more terrifying than before appeared. It was like a sea of blood, rolling and surging above his head. The sky, earth, and void of the mountain behind the imperial palace were all dyed red at this moment. No deity art can threaten me. Qin Feiyang stood proudly in the air, showing his domineering aura. Is that so? If you continue to be so confident, I can guarantee that you will regret it in the end. Zhuge Xingfeng smiled ferociously. He raised his dragon claw high and pressed it down. The blood waves above his head poured down in torrents, crazily pouncing towards Qin Feiyang. The terrifying aura shrouded all directions. The earth suddenly trembled violently, and cracks spread out. However, Qin Feiyang was indifferent. When the wave of blood came, he raised his arm and met it with a palm. Golden light surged in his palm. As long as he had the return formula, no matter what divine art the opponent used, it would become his trump card. Boom. There was no suspense. The wave of blood turned in the air and drowned Zhuge Xingfeng again. For a moment, Zhuge Xingfeng's shrill scream, his unwilling roar, resounded through the sky. Why did God give him such a divine art? I don't accept it. The second move of the blood dragon formula, rolling blood thunder. The wave of blood rolled crazily. Streaks of blood-red lightning swept out from the wave of blood, carrying a destructive aura, and continuously bombarded Qin Feiyang. It's useless. Qin Feiyang shook his head and suddenly stretched out his hand. Waves of golden light roared out. All the blood-red lightning was reflected back and entered Zhuge Xingfeng's body. In just a moment, Zhuge Xingfeng's beast body was full of holes and blood flowed out. Why is this happening? I am the #1 of the War God Temple. How can I be defeated by him? The third move, Blood Dragon. Zhuge Xingfeng had completely lost his mind. The blood qi in Xiao Chen's body and the battle qi in his qi si poured out without reservation, turning into a huge blood dragon that was several kilometers long. The blood dragon bared its fangs and brandished its claws as it charged at Qin Feiyong. I told you it's useless. Why don't you believe me? Qin Feiyong shook his head. Roar. Accompanied by a dragon's roar, the divine dragon seal appeared in the sky and instantly grew to thousands of feet in size to meet the blood dragon. Boom. A loud explosion rang out, shocking the entire imperial city. The blood dragon, without any resistance, was directly crushed by the divine dragon seal. Zhuge Xingfeng was so angry that he spat out blood. This was the difference between the divine arts. Although they were both deity skills, a lower-level deity skill would be able to destroy a higher-level deity skill. Qin Feiyong said indifferently, "What else do you have? Show me all of them. I'll let you die knowing why." From the beginning to the end, he was like a mountain, standing steadily in the void, without moving half a step. Roar! Ah! Zhuge Xingfeng roared and roared as if he had gone mad. He was already covered in wounds, but Qin Feiyong did not move at all. For him, this was not only a humiliation, but also a torture. You will regret it. You will. The fourth move, Blood Dragon True Form. As he roared, his beast body swelled again, and the murderous aura around him became even more terrifying. Finally, Zhuge Xingfeng had completely turned into a real blood dragon. His body was hundreds of feet long, covered in dense scales, and his murderous aura was monstrous. Roar! He raised his huge head and let out a deafening dragon roar. He opened his bloody mouth and pounced on Qin Feiyong. Interesting. Qin Feiyong murmured. It was his first time seeing a divine art that could turn a living person into a blood dragon. He raised his big hand and waved gently. The purple gold dragon qi surged, and the divine dragon seal appeared again. With monstrous dragon power, it cut through the sky and collided with the blood dragon that Zhuge Xingfeng had turned into. Roar! Zhuge Xingfeng immediately let out a miserable howl as his two dragon claws were shattered. Break! However, he did not retreat half a step. He raised his huge dragon tail and slapped at the divine dragon seal. With a boom, the divine dragon seal was smashed into pieces. Qin Feiyong's body trembled slightly, and a trace of blood flowed from the corner of his mouth. Not bad. You can compete with the first move of the divine dragon technique. However, the divine dragon technique still has 3 moves. How many can you withstand? Qin Feiyong murmured. The purple gold dragon qi surged, and a purple gold divine dragon appeared in the sky. Divine dragon roar. The purple gold divine dragon let out a loud roar. Waves of invisible sound waves suddenly appeared and rushed toward Zhuge Xingfeng like a tide. Roar. In an instant, the sound waves arrived. Like a sharp blade, they drowned Zhuge Xingfeng. Zhuge Xingfeng's beast body was immediately torn apart, and he howled again and again. Qin Feiyong, even if I die, I will drag you to hell with me. Black moon. Eclipse. Eclipse moon. Blood waves. Blood thunder. Blood dragon. Innate superpower. Blood dragon eye. Zhuge Xingfeng roared unwillingly. In the blink of an eye, he had evolved all the divine arts and even activated his fighting soul. His fighting soul was also a blood dragon. In an instant, the entire back mountain of the imperial palace was drowned in divine power. Countless beasts fled at the sight of this. The Kirin army guarding the entrance, as well as the red-clothed woman and others who had fled to the entrance, all looked in the direction of Qin Feiyong and Zhuge Xingfeng in horror. What a terrifying aura! But they also knew that Zhuge Xingfeng had reached the end of his road. With you, Qin Feiyong, to die with me, even if I die, it will be worth it. Zhuge Xingfeng laughed again and again. With all the divine arts and fighting soul, he forcibly shattered the sound waves and charged toward Qin Feiyong. But Qin Feiyong was very calm. There was even a hint of appreciation in his eyes. If he remembered correctly, Zhuge Mingyang had only inherited the first and second moves of Eclipse Moon, but this person had obtained the third move. No wonder he was the #1 in the War God Temple. However, he would not show mercy to his enemies. Boom! Qin Feiyong raised his arm and pointed to the sky. There was a sudden loud noise in the sky. The wind suddenly blew, lightning flashed, and thunder rumbled. The next moment, a statue appeared, and its divine power shook all directions. The third move of the divine dragon art, supreme of 9 and 5. It's your honor to die under the third move of the divine dragon art. Qin Feiyong smiled coldly and waved his hand. The statue raised the broken sword and slashed toward Zhuge Xingfeng. This slash was about to split the void. Stop! But at this moment, an old voice resounded from the depths of the cave. Following closely, a magnificent godly aura surged toward Qin Nan like a thunderbolt, drowning the sky. Qin Feiyong raised his eyebrows. He had actually awakened the fake god in the depths. However, not only did he not stop, the murderous intent in his eyes became even more terrifying. The broken sword fell mercilessly, and the sharpness was destructive. Zhuge Xingfeng's divine arts and fighting soul were instantly turned into ashes. Zhuge Xingfeng's beast body was also split in half by the sword, and blood stained the sky. From now on, Zhuge Xingfeng will no longer exist in this world. Qin Feiyong smiled coldly, turned around and used phantom steps, and rushed toward the entrance without looking back. The emperor statue dissipated as well. Soon, an old man in black descended above the broken mountain range, looking at Zhuge Xingfeng's corpse with a strong murderous intent in his eyes. Qin Feiyong, why did you come back? He suddenly turned around, locked onto Qin Feiyong's disappearing figure, and roared angrily. Qin Feiyong did not respond. The appearance of the fake god was somewhat unexpected. Therefore, he had to hurry and meet up with the Thunder Leopard, Wang Yongfeng, and the others. Otherwise, everyone would be in danger. Chapter 1393. Seeing that Qin Feiyong ignored him, the black-robed old man flew into a rage out of humiliation. Swoosh! He took a step forward and traversed dozens of kilometers in an instant. He was several times faster than Qin Feiyong. Qin Feiyong raised his brows. Initially, he wanted to kill Zhuge Mingyang and the others while he was at it. That was because he knew that Zhuge Mingyang and the others would definitely stop at the entrance and watch. However, it seemed that he could not do that now. The black-robed old man was too fast. He would probably catch up to him before he could reach the entrance. I have to admit that you're really lucky. Qin Feiyong muttered and immediately took out a teleportation gate. This was not the first time he wanted to kill Zhuge Mingyang, but someone would disrupt his plans every time. Boom! However, just as he was about to open the teleportation gate, a deafening sound suddenly came from the entrance. Ah! Following that, screams of pain and despair could be heard. Qin Feiyong was bewildered. The black-robed old man also looked at the entrance immediately with a cold glint in his eyes. It's Lei Bao and the others. The next moment, Qin Feiyong's face revealed a trace of pleasant surprise. He immediately opened the teleportation door and rushed in without looking back. That was right. At the entrance, he sensed the auras of Lei Bao, Wang Yongfeng, and the others. I won't give you another chance to escape. The black-robed old man retracted his gaze and looked at Qin Feiyong. He waved his hand and an invisible force surged towards the teleportation gate like a tide. It was extremely fast. In less than half a blink of an eye, the teleportation gate was smashed into pieces. At the same time that the teleportation gate shattered, Qin Feiyong also fell out of the void, and his entire body was dripping with blood. Qin Feiyong's expression was dark as water. He consumed a healing pill and turned to the black-robed old man. You're a member of the great Qin. Why are you helping the evildoer? The black-robed old man said, It's precisely because I'm a member of the great Qin that I won't allow you to be presumptuous in the capital. I'm presumptuous? Haha. Qin Feiyong threw his head back and laughed maniacally. Everything he had done was for great Qin's safety. But now, these people viewed him as an evil person. How pitiful. Stop struggling and obediently surrender. Wait for Lord Emperor Hong's punishment so that you won't suffer any more physical pain. The black-clothed old man advised. In your dreams. Qin Feiyong smiled coldly and said, One day, all of you will understand exactly who was right and who was wrong in all of this. Whoosh. Finished speaking. Qin Feiyong decisively entered the ancient castle and drove it towards the entrance at lightning speed. Stubborn. The black-robed old man's eyes turned cold as his divine sense spread out in all directions. In an instant, he immediately released his aura and pounced towards the ancient castle. But in the end, however, He was shocked to find that his false god's aura was unable to restrain the ancient castle. If it was in the past, the oppressive might of a semi-divinity realm cultivator would have been able to seal the ancient castle. But things were different now. The first seal of the ancient castle had been removed. Whether it was ability or power, it was far greater than before. Now, the only person who could restrain the ancient castle was probably the true war god. And just as the black-clothed old man was distracted, Qin Feiyong had already driven the ancient castle and pulled a long distance away. He could already vaguely see the entrance. The back mountain of the imperial palace is really dangerous. Qin Feiyong was still in fear. The scene changed and locked onto the rear. Teleportation gate. Immediately, Qin Feiyong's expression changed abruptly. However, in the void behind him, there was no trace of the black-clothed old man, only a dissipating teleportation gate. Could it be? Suddenly, he seemed to have thought of something, and his gaze trembled slightly. He hurriedly changed the scene and locked onto the direction of the entrance. However, because the distance was still a little far, he couldn't see it clearly. But his heart was uneasy. He suspected that the black-clothed old man had most likely opened the teleportation gate and went directly to the entrance. If that was the case, then Thunder Leopard, the three beasts, Wang Yongfeng and the others would be in big trouble. The distance between the ancient castle and the entrance was getting closer and closer. 5 or 6 breaths later. Finally, the situation at the entrance could be seen clearly. And when Qin Feiyong saw the situation at the entrance, his face suddenly became gloomy. Thunder Leopard, the three beasts, Wang Yongfeng and the others were indeed at the entrance. And the black-clothed old man was standing above their heads at this moment, his divine power surging and shaking in all directions. Moreover, everyone stood motionless in the void. Obviously, they were all imprisoned by the black-clothed old man's divine power. And the Kirin army guarding the entrance were all standing in the distance, cautiously vigilant. Qin Feiyong drove the ancient castle and stopped in the void not far from the black-clothed old man. His face was gloomy. The black-clothed old man scanned the void and said lightly, "If you don't want them to die, come out immediately." "Young master, don't come out. It doesn't matter if we die, but you must not fall into the hands of the imperial preceptor. Don't worry about us. Go quickly." Wang Yongfeng and the others roared. But before they finished speaking, Qin Feiyong appeared out of thin air. The black-clothed old man looked at Qin Feiyong and said, "As the rumors say, you are indeed a person who values friendship and righteousness, but sometimes, being too loyal will get you killed." Qin Feiyong ignored him and lowered his head to look down. On the ground below, there were corpses lying quietly, still bleeding. They were the group of people who were with Zhuge Xingfeng before. Qin Feiyong glanced at them one by one and raised his eyebrows slightly. He looked at Wang Yongfeng and the others and asked, "Where's Zhuge Mingyang? Why don't I see his body?" Everyone was stunned. Wang Yongfeng asked, "Didn't you kill him?" Qin Feiyong shook his head. Wang Yongfeng said, "When we came, we didn't see him either. We thought you had already killed him." Qin Feiyong raised his eyebrows. It seemed that Zhuge Mingyang had been escorted away in advance. "Qin Feiyong, do you think I don't exist?" The black-clothed old man was furious. How dare he talk about Zhuge Mingyang unscrupulously in front of him? What did that put him in? He was a fake god after all. Couldn't they show him some respect? Noisy. However, facing the black-clothed old man's anger, Qin Feiyong was not nervous at all. Instead, he shouted at the black-clothed old man ruthlessly. The black-clothed old man was dumbfounded. Was there something wrong with this kid? How dare he scold him? Did he know what kind of situation he was in now? The Kirin army was also dumbfounded. This guy's courage was indeed not for show. Qin Feiyong looked at the black-clothed old man and said indifferently, "Do you think I escaped into the castle because I was afraid of you? If not because you were afraid of me, then why?" The black-clothed old man frowned and asked, "It's because I don't want to kill you. After all, you're loyal to the great Qin. You're just being confused by the state preceptor." Qin Feiyong said. In fact, he was pretending to be calm. Because at this time, he couldn't show the slightest bit of guilt or panic. Otherwise, it would lead to a fatal disaster. "You don't want to kill me?" The black-clothed old man was petrified again. Was there something wrong with this kid's head? Is your memory that bad? It seems that I have to remind you. Who saved me not long ago in the central square? Qin Feiyong sneered. Hearing this, the black-clothed old man's eyes trembled. He quickly scanned the void, his eyes full of vigilance. You remember now, right? Although Elder Qin and Lu Xingchen are not here now, I still have 10 fake gods with me. They are hiding nearby now, watching you. As long as I give the order, the entire imperial palace will be destroyed in an instant. Now tell me, do I have the ability to kill you? Qin Feiyong sneered. The black-clothed old man's heart sank. Now that Emperor Hong and the state preceptor had gone to rescue the little prince, if Qin Feiyong started a massacre at this time, no one would be able to stop him. He did not doubt Qin Feiyong's words. First, Qin Feiyong was too calm. Second, those 10 fake gods, he did see them with his own eyes, and he also heard them call Qin Feiyong young master. Wait, why did Qin Feiyong say that he was confused by the state preceptor? He looked at Qin Feiyong and asked, what do you mean by that sentence? Confused by the state preceptor? What did he confuse us about? Qin Feiyong's heart moved. He looked at the Kirin army and shouted, get lost immediately. Hearing that, without exception, all the Kirin army's faces suddenly changed, and they hurriedly turned around and fled. After they left, Qin Feiyong looked at the black-clothed old man again and said, if I told you that everything that Emperor Hong said in the central square today was a lie, would you believe it? The black-clothed old man said angrily, don't talk nonsense. Who is Emperor Hong? Would he lie to everyone? I knew you would have this reaction. But let me tell you, he was full of lies. I didn't kill the emperor. Because he didn't die at all. He's somewhere right now, enjoying himself. I didn't steal the imperial jade seal either. I snatched it from the emperor's hands in broad daylight. Also, old Qin and the commander of the Kirin army did not betray them, because they are the same as you, loyal to the great Qin. Qin Feiyong said. This? The black-clothed old man's face was stunned. After a long time, he finally recovered and asked, are you sure that His Majesty is not dead? Yes. The incident of the emperor being killed in the imperial study was purely a trap set by the emperor himself. Qin Feiyong nodded. Why did he do that? Where is he now? The black-clothed old man frowned. I don't know why he did that. As for where he is, I don't want to talk too much. If you have the chance, you can ask old Qin and the commander of the Kirin army. They all know. Qin Feiyong said. The black-clothed old man's eyes showed a hint of struggle. He really didn't know whether he should believe Qin Feiyong's words or not. Whether you believe it or not, you must release him today. Otherwise, I will slaughter the entire imperial palace. Don't doubt my words. I believe that you have already understood my character from the mouths of others. Since I dare to say it, then I will definitely do it. As for the imperial preceptor and Emperor Hong, in order to rescue the little prince, I'm afraid they won't be able to return for a while. Qin Feiyong said indifferently. The black-clothed old man's pupils constricted, and he said in a deep voice, using the little prince to trick the imperial preceptor and Emperor Hong, and slaughtering the entire Xueqi family, you really know how to scheme. You flatter me. But have you thought about it? From the moment I entered the imperial city until now, other than the people of the Xueqi family, have I killed anyone else? No. I killed all the people of the Xueqi family. Chapter 1394. Why? Did the Xueqi family do something to you? The black-clothed old man asked. It's not a personal grudge. Qin Feiyong shook his head. Then why? The black-clothed old man frowned. Qin Feiyong's eyes were cold as he said word by word, because they are thinking about my great Qin's empire. What? The black-clothed old man's eyes trembled. I know, with my current situation, no matter what I say, you won't really believe me. I don't want to waste my breath anymore. Let them go. Qin Feiyong said lightly. The black-clothed old man looked deeply at Qin Feiyong and withdrew his pressure. Lei Bao, Wang Yongfeng, and the others immediately ran behind Qin Feiyong as if they were running for their lives, their faces full of fear. Qin Feiyong waved his hand and sent everyone to the castle. Then he looked at the black-clothed old man and asked, What's your name? Qin Sheng. The black-clothed old man said, You'd better hide all the words I said to you in your heart. Don't mention it to anyone, especially the state preceptor and Emperor Hong. Otherwise, It will bring you a fatal disaster. Qin Feiyong warned. Qin Sheng frowned. Was it that serious? Don't doubt it. Because Old Man Qin is a good example. Qin Feiyong said meaningfully. Then, he activated the teleportation door and left the Arch Palace without looking back. Emperor Hong lied? His Majesty is not dead? Who is telling the truth? After the portal dissipated, Qin Sheng retracted his gaze, lowered his head, and muttered to himself. Outside the city, in the sky above a certain forest, Qin Feiyong appeared out of thin air. His face was also full of lingering fear. If it weren't for the last-minute plan to deceive Qin Sheng, Lei Bao, Wang Yongfeng, and the others would have been doomed. But then again, although this time he almost fell and didn't go to the law enforcement hall, the harvest was still great. Not only did he get rid of the entire Zhuge family, but he also figured out Qin Sheng's position. Previously, although Qin Sheng did not express his opinion directly, it was not difficult to tell from Qin Sheng's expression that if everything he said was true, then Qin Sheng would definitely stand on his side. One had to know. Qin Sheng was a veteran false god. If he really became an ally, it would be of great help to him. Whoosh! Letting out a long breath, Qin Feiyong entered the castle. Looking at Lei Bao, Wang Yongfeng, and the others, he asked, "How was it?" Not a single survivor. The entire Zhuge manor has been razed to the ground. Furthermore, we also found a treasure vault in the Zhuge family, and obtained a large amount of wealth and medicinal herbs. They are all with Old Man Wang. Lei Bao snickered. Very good. Qin Feiyong nodded. He looked at Wang Yongfeng and said, "Give those things to Fatso and Dan Wang Kai. Let them sort them out." All right. Wang Yongfeng nodded. With a wave of his hand, dozens of cosmos sacks appeared and piled up on the ground. So many. Qin Feiyong was shocked. Fatso and Dan Wang Kai immediately surrounded him, their eyes shining with greed. Wang Yongfeng shook his head in amusement. Suddenly, he seemed to have thought of something. He turned to Qin Feiyong and asked, "Young master, are the 10 false gods of the Lu family really at the back mountain of the Imperial Palace?" I lied to Qin Sheng. Qin Feiyong smiled. Lied. Everyone looked at each other. He was too good at pretending. Previously, when they saw Qin Feiyong's calm expression, even they believed it to be true. Qin Feiyong smiled and took out the image crystal. Lu Hong opened her eyes at this time and sighed. It's a pity that although we eliminated the Zhuge family, we didn't manage to kill Zhuge Mingyang. This person's threat can't be underestimated. There will be a chance sooner or later. Qin Feiyong snorted and activated the image crystal. Buzz. Soon. Old Man Qin's shadow appeared in the void in front of him. "Give me your current coordinates," Qin Feiyong said. Old Man Qin immediately gave Qin Feiyong a coordinate. Qin Feiyong put away the image crystal, left the castle, opened the teleportation door, and arrived in the sky above a mountain. As soon as he appeared, he sensed 4 terrifying auras. Moreover, there was also a tense atmosphere. He looked down and saw a huge mountain peak below. At the peak of the mountain, Old Man Qin and Lu Xingchen stood together. Lu Xingchen grabbed the little prince, and a wisp of divine sense floated in front of him, emitting a great pressure. Old Man Qin held the Chong Xue in his hand and stared at the state preceptor and Emperor Hong opposite him. On the other side, the state preceptor and Emperor Hong stood side by side, their bodies also surrounded by killing intent. So lively. Qin Feiyong chuckled and landed beside Old Man Qin. The state preceptor's gaze turned and landed on Qin Feiyong, and said in a deep voice, "What did you do to the Zhuge family?" Is there a need to say that? Not a single one was left alive. Killed them all, including Zhuge Wuhou, Zhuge Nanhua, and Zhuge Nangong, the 2-peak Realm 9 Star War Empress. Qin Feiyong laughed. "You beast." Hearing this, the state preceptor was furious. Old Man Qin sneered, don't move, the Chong Xue in this old man's hands is not to be trifled with." Upon hearing Chong Xue, the state preceptor's pupils suddenly contracted, filled with fear. Right. And the monsters of the Zhuge family in the War God Shrine, they were all killed by me. Qin Feiyong said again. What? The state preceptor's body trembled, and asked, "What about Zhuge Xingfeng and Zhuge Mingyang?" "I killed Zhuge Xingfeng with my own hands. As for Zhuge Mingyang, he was lucky enough to escape." Qin Feiyong said regretfully. Bastard! The state preceptor immediately roared, and his eyes turned blood red, like a wild beast that had gone berserk. Qin Feiyong asked curiously, You care so much about Zhuge Xingfeng? Just who is the descendant of the Zhuge family? The state preceptor turned a deaf ear to him and said sinisterly, Just you wait, this state preceptor will definitely make you pay with your blood. I'm waiting every day. Bring it on at any time. Qin Feiyong sneered. At this time, Emperor Hong said expressionlessly, Your goal has been achieved, it's time to let the little prince go. Qin Feiyong waved his hand and said, Return it to them. Catch it well. If you fall to your death, I won't be responsible. Lu Xingchen laughed coldly, picked up the little prince, and threw him towards Emperor Hong. The little prince was currently in a coma and didn't know anything. Emperor Hong hurriedly stepped forward and reached out to hug the little prince. Seeing that the little prince had only fainted, he heaved a sigh of relief. Bastard, die! Just as Emperor Hong caught the little prince, the state preceptor suddenly exploded and slapped towards Qin Feiyong. Old Man Qin and Lu Xingchen looked at each other, a cold light flashing in their eyes. The power of the false god and consciousness immediately rushed towards Chang Shui. Clang! Chang Shui immediately released a world-destroying divine might and sharpness. Emperor Hong's expression changed as he looked at the state preceptor and shouted, What are you doing? Stop! The state preceptor unwillingly stopped in his tracks. Emperor Hong waved his hand and a teleportation gate opened. He said gloomily, Go! With that, he stepped into the teleportation gate without looking back. The state preceptor did not move. He stared at Qin Feiyong, his old eyes filled with ferocity. If you want to fight, then fight. If you don't want to fight, then scram. What are you waiting for? Qin Feiyong looked at him provocatively. The state preceptor couldn't help but clench his fists tightly, making cracking sounds. His face was so gloomy that it was frightening. However, when he saw the Chang Shui in Old Man Qin's hands, a trace of fear crept into his eyes. He had already seen the power of Chang Shui when he fought with Ren Duxing last time. Even a divine artifact could be easily destroyed. If Old Man Qin and Old Man Qin really revived Chang Shui, even if he and Emperor Hong joined hands, they might not be a match. Emperor Hong stood in the teleportation gate and looked at Qin Feiyong and the other two. He looked impatiently at the state preceptor and shouted, I told you to leave, didn't you hear me? Boom! The state preceptor stomped on the ground, and the entire mountain instantly collapsed with a deafening sound. Thick smoke covered the sky. One day, your fate will be the same as this giant mountain. Perhaps, it will be even worse than this giant mountain. After leaving behind these harsh words, the state preceptor turned around and entered the teleportation gate. Soon, the two of them and the little prince disappeared from the sight of Qin Feiyong and the other two. How delightful! Lu Xingchen laughed loudly. Old Man Qin also laughed. After returning the Chang Shui to Qin Feiyong, he gave Qin Feiyong a thumbs up and praised, Well done. Now that the Zhuge family has been completely annihilated, the state preceptor has lost his left and right arms. In a short period of time, he definitely won't dare to stir up trouble again. No. Although the Zhuge family has been destroyed, there is still the Law Enforcement Hall. The people of the Law Enforcement Hall are all the confidants of the state preceptor. These people can't be underestimated. Qin Feiyong waved his hand. Lu Xingchen stopped laughing and frowned. Then why didn't you get rid of them all just now? Qin Feiyong said helplessly, I also want to, but a fake god has awakened in the back mountain, so I have to give up. What bad luck. Lu Xingchen cursed in his heart. Old Man Qin glanced at Lu Xingchen and transmitted his voice to Qin Feiyong. I think we can't kill the people of the Law Enforcement Hall. Why? Qin Feiyong was suspicious. Although they are the confidants of the state preceptor, they are after all the people of the Great Qin. As long as we get rid of the state preceptor, I believe that they will definitely turn over a new leaf. Old Man Qin said. Turn over a new leaf? Qin Feiyong murmured. The old man in front of him was still too benevolent and thought of everything as simple. However, he couldn't refute it face to face. Qin Feiyong looked at Lu Xingchen and asked, What are you going to do next? Now I definitely can't go back to the temple. Let's find a place to meditate and wait for the miracle to open. Lu Xingchen smiled and said, a light flashing in the depths of his eyes. Qin Feiyong's eyes flashed and said, You want to go to the miracle so much. What exactly is there in the miracle that makes you envious? Who in this world doesn't want to go to the miracle? Aren't you also looking forward to it? Lu Xingchen said. Qin Feiyang looked at him meaningfully and said, "Then let's part ways for the time being." Lu Xingchen smiled, looked at Old Man Qin and said with a smile, "Old Man Qin, this cooperation was very pleasant. I hope there will be a next time." Finished. Lu Xingchen flashed and disappeared without a trace. However, at this moment, in the sky above the imperial city, a loud sound suddenly exploded, like a thunderclap, deafening. Qin Feiyang and Old Man Qin froze and immediately raised their heads to look. Lu Xingchen, who had just disappeared, once again appeared beside the two of them, looking at the sky above the imperial city in surprise. At the same time, the state preceptor and Emperor Hong, who had just returned to the imperial palace, didn't have time to wake up the little prince. Hearing the loud sound in the sky, they immediately looked up. And Qin Sheng. He stood in the air at the entrance and looked up at the sky above the first city district. His old face was also full of surprise, because the loud sound came from the sky above the central square of the first city district. Chapter 1395. The loud sound was like thunder, and the lingering sound rumbled, echoing over the imperial city for a long time. However, under the watchful eyes of everyone, the loud sound gradually subsided, and nothing appeared in the sky above the first city district. Everything returned to calm. What's going on? Old Qin's face was full of surprise. Qin Feiyang and Lu Xingchen on the side were also full of suspicion. Why would there be a loud sound for no reason? It's really strange. A moment later, Lu Xingchen muttered, looked at Qin Feiyang, and said with a smile, "Let's meet again when the miracle opens." After saying that, he was ready to enter the space divine object. Boom. However, at this moment, another deafening explosion erupted. It still came from the sky above the central square of the first city district. What's the situation? Lu Xingchen raised his eyebrows and looked up again. Rumble. But this time, that loud sound did not disappear, and it kept roaring over the first city district, as if the sky was falling and the earth was splitting, deafening. At this moment, there were also countless people gathered in the central square. Everyone raised their heads one after another, looking at the void above, their eyes full of suspicion. Look! The void is twisting. Suddenly, someone pointed to a certain void and roared. Immediately, everyone looked at the void that the person pointed to, and their faces changed greatly. That void was indeed twisting. Moreover, it was spreading crazily in all directions. In the end, the entire sky above the square trembled violently. That scene, coupled with the endless rumbling sound, felt like some peerless monster was born. Swish! Above the fragrant moon house, two figures suddenly appeared. It was the Imperial Preceptor and Emperor Hong. What the hell is going on? The Imperial Preceptor raised his eyebrows. This kind of thing has never happened before, and this old man doesn't know. Emperor Hong shook his head. Greetings, Emperor Hong. Greetings, Imperial Preceptor. A figure cut through the sky, landed in front of the two, and bowed respectfully. It was Yan Wei. The Imperial Preceptor retracted his gaze, looked at Yan Wei, and asked, "What's the situation of the Xueqi family?" "It's all gone, leaving only ruins." Yan Wei sighed. Damn it! The Imperial Preceptor clenched his fists and gritted his teeth. He looked as if he wanted to eat someone. The ancestors of the Xueqi clan were marquises personally conferred by the late emperor. They have been passed down from generation to generation. Qin Feiyang massacring the Xueqi clan is tantamount to offending the late emperor's divine might. Lord Emperor Hong, please punish Qin Feiyang severely and give the Xueqi family justice. Yan Wei's eyes flashed, and he knelt in front of Emperor Hong, crying out in grief. The imperial advisor glanced at Yan Wei, then faced Emperor Hong and cupped his hands. "My lord, please forgive my subordinate's offense and rudeness, but what he said is reasonable. If Qin Feiyang is not eliminated, I'm afraid it will be difficult to convince the masses." Emperor Hong remained silent. Also, before the previous emperor left, he left behind an imperial order. The 100 martial marquises of the Great Qin cannot be more or less. Therefore, this lowly one earnestly requests Lord Emperor Hong to allow Xueqi Mingyang to inherit the position of Xueqi Wuhou. Yan Wei said again. Let Mingyang inherit the position of Martial Marquis? The imperial advisor was slightly stunned. Although Zhuge Mingyang is young, he is the only child left in this world by Zhuge Wuhou. Furthermore, Zhuge Mingyang's talent is obvious to everyone. For him to inherit the position of Zhuge Wuhou, this lowly one believes that it is the most suitable. Yan Wei said. Hearing these words, the imperial advisor couldn't help but secretly give a thumbs up to Yan Wei. He also liked Yan Wei more and more. Emperor Hong pondered for a moment, then nodded and said, "The position of Martial Marquis of the Zhuge family cannot be left vacant for too long. This old man will seriously consider your suggestion." Yan Wei was overjoyed and knelt in the air. "Then this lowly one will represent the dead Zhuge family to thank Lord Emperor Hong." "You may rise," Emperor Hong said. "Yes." Yan Wei stood up and respectfully stood behind the imperial advisor. Emperor Hong glanced at Yan Wei, then looked at the imperial advisor and smiled. "I didn't expect that there would be such a sensible person by your side." "You're too kind." The imperial advisor hurriedly waved his hand and said, "Lord Emperor Hong, don't blame him for talking too much. He is indeed a bit talkative," Emperor Hong said. Yan Wei's face immediately revealed a trace of nervousness. Originally, he wanted to perform well in front of the imperial advisor and let the imperial advisor trust him more. But he didn't expect that he would actually anger Emperor Hong. However, although he is a bit talkative, what he said and what he thought were all reasonable. My great Qin also needs a talent like him who dares to speak and do. Nurture him well. In the future, he will definitely become your right-hand man. Emperor Hong looked at the imperial advisor and said with a smile. The imperial advisor was stunned. He never thought that Emperor Hong would actually say such words. After coming back to his senses, he hurriedly looked at Yan Wei and said, "Why haven't you thanked Lord Emperor Hong?" Yan Wei quivered and hurriedly bowed. "Thank you, Your Excellency." Emperor Hong nodded his head and raised his head to look at the void above again. The imperial advisor glanced at Emperor Hong and transmitted his voice to Yan Wei. "Your performance this time is very good. After settling the matters at hand, this old man will reward you with a divine art." Divine art? Yan Wei's body trembled, and he secretly said, "Your Excellency, did this subordinate hear wrongly?" "No," the imperial advisor said. Yan Wei was wild with joy and hurriedly thanked. "Many thanks for Your Excellency's kindness of grooming. From today onwards, this lowly one will definitely do my best for Your Excellency, until my death." This was truly a meat pie falling from the sky. Too unexpected. Similarly, it also meant that the imperial advisor already completely trusted him and was prepared to nurture him as a trusted aide. Just as Yan Wei was secretly rejoicing, in the void not far away, another three figures suddenly appeared. The moment these three people appeared, it immediately caused a commotion. Because these three people were precisely Qin Feiyang, Lu Xingchen, as well as Elder Qin. After slaughtering the entire Zhuge family, they actually still dare to brazenly come to the central plaza? Do they think that Emperor Hong and the imperial advisor don't exist? The people discussed animatedly, their eyes full of fear. But within the fear, there was also some hatred mixed in. The Zhuge family was slaughtered from top to bottom. To be able to do such a tragic thing, this Qin Feiyang was truly inhumane. At the same time, sensing the auras of Qin Feiyang trio appear, Emperor Hong, the imperial advisor, and Yan Wei also immediately retracted their gazes and looked at Qin Feiyang trio. Emperor Hong's expression was still indifferent, but the imperial advisor and Yan Wei's faces were full of anger. The imperial advisor disregarded his status and directly shouted, "This place does not welcome beasts, scram immediately." Qin Feiyang glanced at him indifferently, took out Chang Shui, and threw it to Elder Qin. Elder Qin grabbed Chang Shui and turned his head to look at the imperial advisor without saying a word, his eyes full of contempt. Although he didn't say anything, that contemptuous attitude was enough to explain everything. "I have Chang Shui in my hands, what can you do to me? If you have the guts, then come and drive us away. See if I don't destroy you." As for Lu Xingchen, even more so, his disdain was displayed incisively and vividly. From beginning to end, he didn't even look at Emperor Hong and the other two. As soon as he appeared, he raised his head and stared at the void above. The imperial advisor blew his beard and glared, angry to the extreme. But the Chang Shui in Elder Qin's hands was like a towering mountain, pressing down on him until he couldn't breathe. I really didn't expect that such a highly respected person like Elder Qin would actually collude with Qin Feiyang to usurp the throne. This is in line with the old saying, you can't judge a book by its cover. Often, people who look very honest on the surface are very treacherous in their hearts. Someone in the crowd snorted coldly, full of sarcasm. Elder Qin was originally fine. But when he heard this, he immediately bristled with anger and roared, "What do you know? What qualifications do you have to criticize this old man here? A traitor, everyone has the right to kill. Can't we talk about it? Since you dare to do it, don't be afraid of us saying it. His Majesty trusted you so much in vain, but in the end, you are a white-eyed wolf. Disgusting. Look at Lord Imperial Advisor. He is upright, selfless, and loyal to the Great Qin. They are both pillars of the Great Qin. Why is the difference between you two so great?" The crowd began to clamor without restraint. Because with the Imperial Advisor and Emperor Hong holding down the fort, they were not afraid. Preposterous, preposterous. Elder Qin was so angry that he was about to vomit blood. A person who sincerely wanted the good of the Great Qin was reviled by others. A person who truly wanted to usurp the throne was praised by the people of the world. What kind of justice was this? The Imperial Advisor looked at all of this with a smug expression. "Old man, do you see that? This is a method. Although I lost a lot, I gained the hearts of the people. And you? Now you are like a rat crossing the street. Everyone is shouting to beat you up. Do you feel very sullen in your heart?" The Imperial Advisor sent a message to Elder Qin, his words full of sarcasm. Hearing this, Elder Qin stared at the Imperial Advisor, his body trembling. Puff! Finally! He was so angry that he spat out a mouthful of blood. And Qin Feiyang and Lu Xingchen were shocked. They hurriedly looked at Elder Qin and asked with concern, "Are you all right?" "I'm fine." Elder Qin waved his hand. Qin Feiyang looked at the Imperial Advisor and frowned. Then, he retracted his gaze and said to Elder Qin in a low voice, "Why do you have to be so serious? As long as you have a clear conscience, it's fine." "That's right. To argue with a group of ignorant people, aren't you looking for trouble?" Lu Xingchen shook his head helplessly. Looking at Qin Feiyang and Lu Xingchen's calm expressions, Elder Qin could not help but feel ashamed. He was an old antique who had lived for thousands of years, but his mentality could not keep up with the two little fellows. He was truly ashamed. It seems that this old man's state of mind still needs to be improved. Elder Qin smiled bitterly, wiped off the blood from the corner of his mouth, took a deep breath, and finally calmed down the anger in his heart. Qin Feiyang patted Elder Qin's shoulder, raised his head to look at the Imperial Advisor and Emperor Hong, and said indifferently, "What people do, the heavens are watching. Your despicable deeds will be exposed to the world sooner or later. At that time, I want to see how you will face the hundreds of millions of people of my Great Qin." Speaking of which, Qin Feiyang's gaze turned, only looking at Emperor Hong and sneered, "Especially you, Lord Emperor Hong." The meaning behind his words was that as the son of the ancestor, Emperor Hong, it would be even more difficult to clean up the mess. Emperor Hong said indifferently, "Young people are full of vigor, but this old man wants to tell you something. Ginger is still spicier as it gets older." "Then I'll tell you something too. An old man should hide and enjoy life. Don't come out blindly, lest you end up with a bad ending." Qin Feiyang chuckled. "Arrogant. This bastard is too arrogant. He actually cursed his own great-grandfather like that. He still has no conscience, no humanity." Everyone was indignant. Chapter 1396. Seeing Emperor Hong's face darken, Qin Feiyang did not feel the slightest bit of guilt in his heart. Instead, he was extremely happy. He turned his head to look at Lu Xingchen and asked with a smile, "Is there something wrong with what I said?" Lu Xingchen crossed his arms across his chest, looked at Emperor Hong mockingly, and said, "Of course there's nothing wrong with it." Emperor Hong stared at the two of them, his face becoming more and more gloomy. Qin Feiyang and Lu Xingchen looked at each other, and then looked at Emperor Hong in unison, their eyes full of provocation. The atmosphere here gradually became solemn. "I can't help it. These two are too arrogant. If we don't kill them, the heavens will not tolerate it." In the crowd, a middle-aged man suddenly roared, carrying a monstrous emperor's might, and charged towards Qin Feiyang and Lu Xingchen. This person was wearing a pair of large black pants. His upper body was exposed, and he was filled with a wild aura. And his cultivation had reached the 9-star War Emperor. Yes. Kill them, get rid of evil for the people. Among the crowd, 3 more people rushed out. They were also 9-star War Emperor, wearing black robes. So many 9-star War Emperor? Qin Feiyong was surprised. And these 4 people were all unfamiliar faces, and there were no signs on their bodies. Retreat! Almost at the same time, the Imperial Preceptor's roar rang out. And Qin Feiyong looked at the Imperial Preceptor and found that the Imperial Preceptor's face was anxious. Immediately, Qin Feiyong revealed a look of realization. Looking at these 4 people, they should be the Inner Hall's law enforcers. Since they were the Imperial Preceptor's confidants, then he would not be polite. Boom! He raised his hand and waved it. The first move of the ruins art, landslide, instantly appeared. With a terrifying divine might, it blasted towards the 4 people. You dare! The Imperial Preceptor was furious and was about to make a move. It's not your turn to interfere. But Elder Qin took a step forward and stood in front of the Imperial Preceptor. Killing intent surged in his eyes, and the Chongshui in his hand was also buzzing. The Imperial Preceptor immediately became vigilant. Ah! An invisible force arrived in an instant. Accompanied by a series of screams, the bodies of the 4 people were torn apart on the spot, and blood stained the sky. One had to know. Qin Feiyong had yet to deactivate the kill formula. His cultivation had reached the peak of the 9-star Combat Emperor realm. With the divine art, killing 4 ordinary 9-star Combat Emperors was as easy as drinking water. However, this scene caused the people below to no longer dare to utter a word. He actually dared to kill in front of the Imperial Advisor and Emperor Hong? Oh my god! Does this guy have any regard for the law? Who dares to be noisy? Qin Feiyong's blood-red hair fluttered in the wind. His killing intent soared to the heavens as he coldly swept his gaze over the crowd. No one dared to look him in the eye, not even daring to breathe loudly. A moment later, Qin Feiyong finally withdrew his gaze. His big hand made a grabbing motion in the air, and the 4 people's Chenkuan bags flew up into the air and fell into his hand. In these 4 Chenkuan bags, he really did find the identity medallion of an inner court law enforcer. Qin Feiyong grinned and looked up at the state preceptor. He chuckled and said, "Sorry, I accidentally killed another 4 of your subordinates." Faced with such a blatant provocation, the state preceptor almost went mad. All of a sudden, he turned his head to look at Emperor Hong and said in a deep voice, "Your Excellency, we really can't let him continue to be so arrogant. Otherwise, the world will definitely talk behind our backs. Our great Qin Empire is incompetent." Emperor Hong looked at Qin Feiyong gloomily. He suddenly rushed into the clouds and looked down at Qin Feiyong and the other 2. He said word by word, "Come up and fight with this old man." Killing intent flashed in the state preceptor's eyes as he also rushed to Emperor Hong's side. Looking at the indifferent Qin Feiyong and the other 2, he laughed sinisterly. "It's finally as you wish. What are you still hesitating for? You want to fight? All right. This old man will accompany you." Elder Qin took a step forward. His entire body emitted a monstrous aura as he walked up to the peak of the cloud step by step. We've finally started the battle. The people below were all looking forward to it. Clang. However, right at this moment, in the sky above the plaza, a loud sound of metal colliding suddenly exploded. This loud sound was several times louder than the previous rumbling sound. Moreover, it carried an extremely strong penetrating force. Those below the 9-star War Emperor had their eardrums torn apart on the spot as blood spurted out. Everyone was shocked. Just what was the birth of this thing? It was actually so terrifying. Qin Feiyong, Lu Xingchen, Elder Qin, the state preceptor, and Emperor Hong all looked towards the source of the sound. Their expressions suddenly changed. The void above the plaza was actually crazily cracking. How could this be? The void shattered. Could it be that a war god had broken through? Or was it the birth of a divine weapon? After Emperor Hong came back to his senses, he immediately shouted to the state preceptor, "Quickly evacuate the people in the 1st district." "What about Qin Feiyong and the others?" the state preceptor asked. "We can't control them now. If a war god really descends, then it definitely won't be a good thing. We might even need their help." Emperor Hong said in a deep voice. The state preceptor looked at Elder Qin unwillingly and roared, "Everyone, leave the first district immediately." His voice was like a loud bell, echoing in everyone's minds. At this moment, the people gathered in the first district immediately turned around and fled towards the second district. Clang! The sound became louder and louder. The entire world was trembling. Right now, not only the imperial city, but all the living beings in the imperial capital could hear this mysterious loud sound. What's going on? This sound seems to be coming from the imperial city. Could it be that Qin Feiyong is causing trouble in the imperial city again? But it shouldn't be. With his cultivation, it's impossible for him to cause such a big commotion. Everyone looked in the direction of the imperial city in bewilderment. Qin Feiyong stared at the shattered void and sent a sound transmission. "Elder Qin, quickly come down and prepare to evacuate at any time." Hearing this, Elder Qin immediately swooped down and landed beside Qin Feiyong. His expression was also extremely solemn. Time passed breath by breath. Suddenly, rays of dazzling divine light emerged from the shattered space. As soon as this divine light appeared, a vast and mighty divine might immediately surged out in all directions like a waterfall with the first district as the center. This divine might is so terrifying. At this moment, not only Qin Feiyong, even Emperor Hong and the state preceptor couldn't help but feel panic. This was a divine might that surpassed the false god. It was as if a god had descended, intimidating everyone's heart. However, no one noticed that Lu Xingchen's eyes were flashing with an inexplicable light at this moment. Clang! That loud sound once again exploded, shaking the heavens and earth. Following closely, in the midst of that divine light, a giant stone door actually emerged. The stone door was 999 feet tall and 99 feet wide. Its entire body was suffused with a dark light, like a gate to hell. It stood in the sky above the first district, emitting a shocking aura. A stone door? What is this divine tool? How could it appear out of thin air above the imperial city? Everyone was dumbfounded. What a familiar aura! Qin Feiyong looked at the stone door and muttered to himself. Suddenly, he seemed to have thought of something. His body trembled slightly as he turned his head to look at Lu Xingchen. However, he saw Lu Xingchen looking at the stone door with an expression of unconcealable excitement. Qin Feiyong sent a sound transmission. Why did the space-time gate appear? That's right. This stone door is the Mujia's space-time gate. Lu Xingchen secretly said, "The space-time gate is in the hands of the snow python. If you want to ask, you should ask her." Qin Feiyong raised his eyebrows and looked up at the space-time gate. Clang! The space-time gate trembled in the void. The divine power was vast and mighty. About 100 breaths passed. With an unprecedented loud noise, the space-time gate stopped trembling, and the shattered void slowly healed. Finally, the space-time gate seemed to be embedded in the void, motionless. The divine light and divine power also gradually dissipated. Could it be that the snow python is coming to the imperial city? Qin Feiyong frowned. The snow python is a real god of war. No one in the world can defeat it. If it really comes to the imperial city, I'm afraid it's not a good thing. I've seen this stone door before. Suddenly, the imperial preceptor said. When did you see it? Emperor Hong was stunned and asked. The imperial preceptor said in a deep voice, when Qin Feiyong sneaked into the divine prison to rescue his mother and friends, there was a masked old man who opened this stone door. It seems to be able to directly teleport to the Forgotten Continent. The person he was talking about was Yigleo. Yigleo has always been wearing a mask. Not to mention the imperial preceptor. Even Qin Feiyong has never seen Yigleo's real face. The masked old man directly teleported to the Forgotten Continent. The imperial preceptor looked at the stone door and muttered to himself. Suddenly, his gaze trembled. Could it be that artifact? The imperial preceptor looked down at Qin Feiyong and said, Emperor Hong, this should be the reinforcements called by Qin Feiyong. He wants to blatantly snatch the throne. At that time, Yigleo and the mysterious ladies group came to the great Qin Empire to help Qin Feiyong. So now, the imperial preceptor naturally thought that it must be Qin Feiyong who called these people. Boom! And before the imperial preceptor's voice fell, the space-time gate slowly opened with a thunderous sound. It's open! Everyone looked at the stone door nervously. especially the Imperial Preceptor. His head was already dripping with sweat. Qin Feiyang already had old Qin, Lu Xingchen, and the 10 fake gods that appeared not long ago. If the people behind the stone door were really Qin Feiyang's helpers, then today would be his end. Boom! When the space-time gate opened a gap, an astonishing aura suddenly rolled out from the gap like a tide. This is the aura of the snow python. Qin Feiyang's gaze trembled. Having known the snow python for so many years, he could recognize the aura of the snow python without seeing it in person. What followed was a head full of doubts. What did the snow python come to the Imperial City for? Rumble. The gap in the space-time gate became bigger and bigger. Finally, Qin Feiyang saw the silhouette of the snow python. At this moment, her body was only a meter long. Although her aura was astonishing, she did not release any divine power. She floated behind the space-time gate. Her long and narrow eyes revealed a ruthless indifference. How could it be her? When the Imperial Preceptor saw the snow python, his face suddenly turned pale. He still remembered the incident that happened in the Central Divine Kingdom. At that time, he was preparing to kill Qin Feiyang, but this snow python suddenly appeared and directly suppressed him and sent him back to the great Qin Empire. And with his false god cultivation, he could not resist at all. So he knew very well how terrifying the snow python's strength was. This was an existence that he absolutely could not provoke. However, except for Qin Feiyang and a few others, the others had never seen the snow python before and their eyes were filled with curiosity. Because this situation was greatly beyond their expectations. Chapter 1397. Boom. A moment later. Under everyone's gaze, the gate of time and space finally opened completely. The snow python's figure flashed and landed in the sky above the Imperial City. Greetings, Senior. Qin Feiyang took a deep breath, suppressed the uneasiness in his heart, and bowed to the snow python. "And what's going on?" The fearless Qin Feiyang is actually so respectful to it. Everyone was surprised. But then, another scene that made them even more surprised appeared. Greetings, Senior. Greetings, Lord. Old Qin, Emperor Hong, and the State Preceptor, these 3 pseudo-god-level existences, actually all bowed down. Including Lu Xingchen. Everyone's hearts were in turmoil. Not only was Qin Feiyang so respectful, even the State Preceptor and the others were the same. Just what was the origin of this snow python? The snow python looked down at everyone from above. Finally, her gaze fell on Qin Feiyang, a trace of disdain crawling up her cold eyes, and said, "You are indeed a fiend. No matter where you go, it will not be peaceful." Qin Feiyang's face twitched. In public, can't you leave him some face? However, he faintly discovered that the snow python was a little different from before, but he couldn't tell what was different. Emperor Hong glanced at Qin Feiyang, looked at the snow python and cupped his hands. "May I ask, what is the purpose of your visit to my great Qin?" The snow python looked at the Emperor Hong, and said indifferently, "The miracle has appeared in advance." What? Qin Feiyang's gaze trembled. Lu Xingchen's eyes also immediately emitted a scorching light. Old Qin, the State Preceptor, and the Emperor Hong's old eyes were also filled with desire. But other than Qin Feiyang and the others, no one else knew what a miracle was. Revealing a face of suspicion, Qin Feiyang asked, "Senior, you came to the Imperial City specifically to tell us this news?" "Yes. The miracle is not personal. Whether it is the people of the Forgotten Continent or the people of the Great Qin Empire, they can all enter. So, in order to make it easier for you to enter the Divine Ruins, I have specially created a passage to the Central Divine Kingdom using the space-time gate. Before the miracles disappear, the people of the 2 continents can freely travel to the 2 continents through the doors of time and space." The snow python said. "What do you mean?" Qin Feiyang and the others were bewildered. "It means that during this period of time, the Great Qin Empire's people can enter the Forgotten Continent, and the Forgotten Continent's people can also freely enter the Great Qin Empire." Snow python said coldly. This, Qin Feiyang and the others were shocked beyond words. The people of the 2 continents could travel freely through the space-time gate? Emperor Hong asked, "Your Excellency, according to what you said, before the miracle disappears, this space-time gate will always exist?" "That's right. The gate of time and space will remain here until the miracle disappears," the snow python said. Emperor Hong's face changed and he hurriedly said, This isn't appropriate, right? In the past, the only way to go to the Forgotten Continent was through the teleportation altar in the spiritual state. Moreover, the snow python guarding the altar did not allow the people of the two continents to freely enter and exit. Therefore, over the years, no matter what happened, it was the private affairs of the two continents, and they did not interfere with each other. But now, the snow python used the gate of time and space to directly open a passage. And this passage was connected to the most important place of the two continents, the imperial capital and the central divine kingdom. The most important thing was that there were no restrictions? Wasn't this the same as directly turning the two continents into one continent? Linking the two continents together, although it seemed to be a good thing, it would actually involve a lot of problems. The biggest problem was the situation. Because of the emperor, the current situation of the Great Qin Empire was already chaotic enough. The little prince had just ascended the throne. Qin Feiyang was also eyeing covetously from the side. If at this time, the people of the Forgotten Continent also came to interfere, then for the Great Qin Empire, it would shake the foundation of the empire, and at the most, it might be a disaster. Inappropriate? The snow python lowered its head to look at Emperor Hong and said lightly, "So your Great Qin Empire doesn't want to go to the miracle?" "Yes." Emperor Hong nodded without hesitation and said, "But there's no need to use the gate of time and space to connect the two continents." "Then what do you think should be done?" The snow python said, "My Great Qin spirit state has a teleportation altar that connects to the Forgotten Continent. We can use the teleportation altar to enter the Forgotten Continent." Emperor Hong said. The snow python's gaze turned cold and said, "Don't you know that this sovereign's cultivation place is on the altar? Is there a problem?" Emperor Hong was puzzled. "Nonsense. There's a big problem. You people of Great Qin go to the Forgotten Continent through the altar every day. How can this sovereign cultivate?" The snow python said angrily. Seeing the snow python angry, Emperor Hong's gaze trembled, and he hurriedly said, "I was careless, please forgive me." "Humph. Don't be ungrateful. This sovereign is doing this purely for the good of your Great Qin. Because using the gate of time and space to connect the imperial capital and the central divine kingdom can save you a lot of time." The snow python snorted coldly. "Yes, yes, yes." Emperor Hong nodded repeatedly, then looked at the snow python, and carefully said, "But sir, I have a small request. Can you not let the people of the Forgotten Continent enter my Great Qin Empire?" "Are you joking? Only your Great Qin people can enter the Forgotten Continent, but the people of the Forgotten Continent can't enter Great Qin? Even if this sovereign agrees, the people of the Forgotten Continent will not agree. This sovereign must be fair and just. Either neither is allowed, or both are allowed. Choose for yourself. But you have to consider carefully, if the choice is not allowed, then this sovereign will not allow your Great Qin people to step into the Forgotten Continent. To put it bluntly, your Great Qin people can forget about entering the divine ruins." The snow python said. Emperor Hong fell silent, his heart incomparably bitter. The divine ruins were in the Forgotten Continent, and if the people of Great Qin wanted to enter the divine ruins, they had to pass through the Forgotten Continent. In other words, the Forgotten Continent had an innate advantage. So, he had no choice. In other words, as long as his Great Qin wanted to enter the divine ruins, then he had no qualifications to negotiate. Lu Xingchen glanced at Emperor Hong, and secretly sent a sound transmission to Qin Feiyang. "To actually negotiate with the snow python, your great-grandfather really doesn't know what's good for him." His words were filled with a thick sense of ridicule. Qin Feiyang glanced at Lu Xingchen, raised his head to look at the space-time gate, and frowned slightly. Although he didn't have a good impression of Emperor Hong, for the sake of the big picture, using the space-time gate to connect the imperial capital and the central divine kingdom was indeed not appropriate. Frankly speaking, he didn't quite agree. But facing the powerful snow python, he had no choice. In fact, endangering Great Qin, in Qin Feiyang's eyes, was only secondary. After all, the snow python had also said very clearly that the passage opened by the space-time gate was only temporary, and would close when the divine ruins disappeared. What worried Qin Feiyang the most was that after the two continents were connected, these people would most likely join forces to deal with him. Because the masters of the two continents were all his enemies. For example, the chief pagoda master, the Mu family, the imperial preceptor, Emperor Hong, and so on. Last time in the Endless Sea, he set a trap to snatch the divine crystal, and the mysterious lady would definitely not let it go. So, for Qin Fei Yang, how to prevent the people of the two continents from joining forces was the main point. The snow python glanced at Qin Fei Yang's group and asked, "Who else has any objections?" Everyone fell silent. With the strength of the snow python, who would dare to have any objections? Since there are no objections, then you should prepare to open the divine ruins in half a month. After the snow python finished speaking, it disappeared without a trace. What exactly is the divine ruins? Even Emperor Hong is so eager. Could it be a treasure left behind by an ancient war god? Treasure? Does that mean that everyone can enter? If you can go in and get 1 or 2 divine objects if you're lucky, then you'll be rich. As soon as the snow python disappeared, the people in the imperial city were in an uproar. Qin Fei Yang, Lu Xingchen, Old Qin, the state preceptor, Emperor Hong, and others looked at the space-time gate, their eyes flickering. After a while, Lu Xingchen retracted his gaze and looked at Qin Fei Yang with a smile. "Brother Qin, your next situation may be very bad. Why don't you come with me to the Mu Jia? Although the Mu Jia may not be able to protect you, at least there's a way out." Go to the Mu Jia? Qin Fei Yang was taken aback and glanced at Lu Xingchen. Looking at Lu Xingchen's sincerity, Qin Fei Yang held back his laughter and said, "Forget it, I'm afraid I'll die faster if I go to the Mu Jia with you." Lu Xingchen was stunned and shook his head helplessly. "It seems that Brother Qin still doesn't believe me." "It's not that I don't believe you, it's because there are some things that you don't know yet. When you know, you'll definitely go crazy." Qin Fei Yang smiled meaningfully. "Go crazy? What kind of storm haven't I seen before? It can't be." Lu Xingchen frowned. "When you go to the Mu Jia, you'll know." Qin Fei Yang smiled faintly and immediately opened a portal, ready to leave. "Qin Fei Yang, come out and die for this old man." However, at this moment, an angry roar full of killing intent came from the Forgotten Continent. Following closely, an old man in white rushed out of the space-time gate like lightning and landed in the sky above the city. "You came just in time," Qin Fei Yang murmured. Without looking up, just by listening to the voice, he knew that it was Wang Yuer's grandfather, Wang Su. "Qin Fei Yang, if you have the guts, don't run away today." After Wang Su appeared, another old man appeared. He wore a mask and stood next to Wang Su. He glanced down at the imperial city, his killing intent soaring to the heavens. "Another old acquaintance has come," Qin Fei Yang murmured. This voice belonged to the Mu Jia's white-robed old man, Mu Chongyun. "What's going on?" People looked at Wang Su and Mu Chongyun, their faces full of surprise. The portal had just opened, and someone from the Forgotten Continent came to find trouble with Qin Fei Yang? When did he go to the Forgotten Continent? There were many people in the imperial city, such as the civilians, in fact, didn't know that Qin Fei Yang was in the Forgotten Continent a few years ago. Naturally, they didn't know what Qin Fei Yang did in the Forgotten Continent. But the imperial tutor. He looked at Wang Su and Mu Chongyun. His eyes couldn't help but flicker. As for Qin Fei Yang, he didn't pay attention to Wang Su and Wang Yu and directly entered the teleportation gate. Don't even think about leaving. Chapter 1398. Old man Qin raised his eyebrows and looked at Mu Zhongyun, coldly snorting. "My great Qin will not allow you people from the Forgotten Continent to be presumptuous." Boom. Divine power surged out, roaring towards Mu Zhongyun. False god. Mu Zhongyun was stunned. But then, a hint of disdain climbed up the corner of his mouth. With a flick of his sleeve, the mighty divine power rolled in all directions, and old man Qin immediately spat out a mouthful of blood. "What? Peak false god realm!" Old man Qin exclaimed, his face pale. "Peak false god realm? What's going on? There's actually a peak false god realm who came to find trouble with Qin Fei Yang?" Hearing old man Qin's exclamation, everyone's faces were full of horror. "Old man Qin, ignore them, follow me." Qin Fei Yang's voice came from the teleportation gate. Old man Qin glanced at Mu Zhongyun gloomily, turned around, and rushed into the teleportation gate. "Little bastard, I will make you pay the price today." Mu Zhongyun's face was ferocious, and his whole body was like a comet, crashing into the teleportation gate. "Qin Fei Yang, a man, don't be a coward." Wang Su also roared and rushed towards the teleportation gate. What do you want to do? However, at this moment, Lu Xingchen took a step forward, blocking in front of Mu Zhongyun. Get lost. Mu Zhongyun didn't even look and directly shouted. Lu Xingchen was taken aback. His face darkened as he asked, "Say that again?" His eyes were filled with a cold light. Mu Zhongyun was stunned, looking at Lu Xingchen. A trace of surprise climbed up on his face. "You are?" "Yes, it's me," Lu Xingchen said expressionlessly. Mu Zhongyun's body trembled, and he hurriedly bowed. "Greetings." But before he could finish his words, Lu Xingchen stretched out his hand to stop Mu Zhongyun. "Take me to the Forgotten Continent." But Mu Chongyun was about to talk about how Qin Feiyong had gone to the Forgotten Continent to set up a trap for the Mu family. But Lu Xingchen's gaze turned cold as he shouted, "Do you need me to repeat myself?" Mu Chongyun's neck shrank. He could only suppress the anger in his heart. He took Lu Xingchen and flew towards the space-time gate. Looking at the space-time gate, the anger in Mu Zhongyun's heart was uncontrollable. The gate of time and space originally belonged to the Mu family. But now, it was shared by everyone. He was unwilling to accept this. At the same time, Lu Xingchen looked at the gate of time and space as he passed through it. A hint of hostility flashed in his eyes. However, without any hesitation, he followed behind Mu Zhongyun and quickly disappeared in the direction of the Fire Phoenix mountain range. Although Mu Zhongyun left, Wang Su didn't. He stared at the disappearing portal and roared, "Qin Feiyong, are you still a man? If you are still a man, come back immediately and explain it to this old man face to face." "Old Wang, all these grievances are only between me and the Chief Tower Master. It has nothing to do with you. Why do you have to do this?" Qin Feiyong's sigh came from the portal. "What a joke. This old man is a member of the Chief Tower. The Chief Tower Master's business is naturally this old man's business. Ask yourself with your conscience, how did my Chief Tower treat you? How did I, Wang Su, treat you? Why do you repay kindness with ingratitude? The most excessive thing is that you actually deceived this old man's granddaughter's feelings. This is absolutely unforgivable." Wang Su roared. "What is the Chief Tower? Is it very powerful in the Forgotten Continent?" Everyone was suspicious. For many people present, today was the first time they heard the name of the Forgotten Continent, let alone the Chief Tower in the Forgotten Continent. But there was one point that they all understood. Qin Feiyong not only went to the Forgotten Continent, but also deceived this old man's granddaughter. This old man came to collect debts. However, Qin Feiyong's voice never sounded again. The portal also dissipated into the void. Wang Su stopped in the air above the plaza, looking at the place where the portal disappeared, his face ashen. The State Preceptor and Emperor Hong looked at each other, flew in front of Wang Su, and cupped their hands. "May I ask who you are?" Wang Su turned a deaf ear. The State Preceptor frowned and was about to speak. Wang Su finally retracted his gaze, looked at the two of them and said indifferently, "I am Chief Tower Elder Wang Su. Who are you?" Seeing Wang Su's arrogant attitude, the State Preceptor was very unhappy in his heart, and said, "This old man is the great Qin State Preceptor. This is Lord Emperor Hong, the son of the Qin Emperor." "What? The son of the Qin Emperor?" Wang Su looked at Emperor Hong, his old face full of shock. Emperor Hong smiled and asked, "Elder Wang knows my late father? The name of the Qin Emperor shakes the four seas. I naturally know." Wang Su cupped his hands and said, his attitude rather polite. Emperor Hong smiled and said, "May I ask Elder Wang, what has Qin Feiyong done in the Forgotten Continent all these years? To make you so angry?" "Humph. This bastard beast." Wang Su snorted coldly, looked at Emperor Hong and said, "Since you are the son of the Qin Emperor, then you should also be Qin Feiyong's elder. When you have time, discipline him properly, so as to not bring a calamity to your great Qin in the future." Finished. Wang Su then soared into the air, disappearing into the gate of time and space. The State Preceptor sneered, "Lord Emperor Hong, did you see that? This is Qin Feiyong. No matter where he goes, he is a rat crossing the street. Everyone wants to kill him." Emperor Hong glanced at the State Preceptor, and also flew up into the sky, standing in front of the gate of time and space. The gate of time and space that was connected was like a large open door. Standing at the door, one could clearly see the situation on both sides. And opposite the gate of time and space was the main tower's Pill Tower Plaza. At this moment, the Pill Tower Plaza was also packed with people. There were people from the various super tribes, disciples of the main tower, and disciples of the Holy Tower and Holy Mountain. They also looked at the gate of time and space curiously, discussing animatedly. Among the crowd, a young man, about 25 or 26 years old, wearing a pair of big pants. His skin was slightly tanned, and his temperament was extraordinary. He looked at the gate of time and space and said, "Tell me, how is the young master doing in the great Qin Empire?" That's right. This person was Wang Zicheng. Next to Wang Zicheng, there were 7 young men and women. Their appearances were all different and uneven. But without exception, whether it was their aura or temperament, they were all very outstanding. Standing in the crowd, like a crane in a flock of chickens, it was hard not to notice. They were the Black Monkey, Dead Face, Big Barbarian Bull, Ice Queen, Ghost Queen, and the Xueqi brothers. Hearing Wang Zicheng's words, the Black Monkey laughed and said, "Is there a need to say? As the descendant of the Qin Emperor, and also receive the inheritance of the Qin Emperor, the young master will definitely be doing well in the great Qin Empire." That's not necessarily true. Back then, the young master said that his relationship with the great Qin Empire was not that good. Dead Face said with a straight face. That was back then. Now that the young master is so strong, even the Mu family dares to make trouble, let alone the great Qin Empire. The Black Monkey immediately retorted. Speaking of the Mu family, I really admire the young master. Not only did he kill all the Mu family's war emperors, even Yiglao died in the Endless Sea. This method is really not something that the few of us can compare to. Big Barbarian Bull exclaimed. The Ice Queen, Ghost Queen, and the Xueqi brothers also nodded, their faces full of admiration. Wang Zicheng rolled his eyes and said to himself, "Now, as long as we pass through the space-time gate, we can directly enter the great Qin Empire's imperial capital. Should we go and take a look?" The Black Monkey and the others looked at each other and were a little tempted. Xueqi frowned and said, "That's not good. We are now disciples of the main pagoda. If we want to go to the great Qin Empire, shouldn't we ask the main pagoda master first?" Back then, the main pagoda master sent people to Qinghai to investigate. In the end, he took a fancy to the talent of Wang Zicheng and the others and wanted to take them in for his own use. Wang Zicheng later asked Qin Feiyang, and Qin Feiyang also agreed to let them enter the main pagoda. So now, Wang Zicheng and the others, not only had they joined the main pagoda, but they had also become disciples of the Saint Peak. Moreover, the main pagoda master valued the 8 of them and did not hesitate to nurture them. As a result, their cultivation was about to break through to the 3-star war emperor. Of course, compared to Viper and Dan Wang Kai, they were still far from it. After all, Viper and Dan Wang Kai were cultivating in the castle. 1 day was equivalent to 10 days. Ask for what? It's not like we're really working for the main pagoda. Moreover, with our talent, even if the main pagoda master knows that we went to the great Qin Empire without permission, he won't say anything. Wang Zicheng said proudly. Then, hearing Wang Zicheng's words, Xueqi couldn't help but feel restless. "Let's go!" The Black Monkey secretly yelled, and the group of 8 immediately flew toward the dimensional gate in a grandiose manner. "What are you going to do?" Seeing this, the other main pagoda disciples immediately looked at the 8 of them and asked. The 8 of them completely ignored them and turned into streams of light, directly passing through the space-time gate. "Stop!" Emperor Hong was standing at the side, watching the 8 of them enter the imperial capital openly. He frowned slightly and shouted, Who are you? What qualifications do you have to control us?" Wang Zicheng looked at Emperor Hong proudly. Emperor Hong was stunned. Other than Qin Feiyang, there was actually someone who dared to speak to him like this? "Old man, don't block the way, okay? Just now, Lord Snow Python said that people from both continents can freely enter and leave. Do you want to disobey Lord Snow Python's orders?" The Black Monkey shouted. The Imperial Preceptor below, as well as the people of the Imperial City, were all dumbfounded as they watched this scene. Were these 8 people stupid? Did they know who the old man standing in front of them was? He actually dared to be so presumptuous. Emperor Hong's face twitched as he asked, "Do you know my identity in the great Qin Empire?" "Who cares about your identity? In short, a good dog doesn't block the way." Dead Face said indifferently. "What's the point of talking nonsense with him? Just go around him." The big barbarian bull coldly snorted, and really went around Emperor Hong's side. That expression, that gaze, was completely treating Emperor Hong as heir. Wang Zicheng and the others glanced at Emperor Hong, and also brushed past him. With a face full of excitement, they flew towards the city below without looking back. Emperor Hong's veins were bulging. But in the end, because he was afraid of angering the snow python, he still endured it, shook his head and sighed. Young people nowadays are really rampant. After saying that, he turned into a stream of light with a heart full of helplessness and disappeared from the back mountain of the imperial palace. The imperial preceptor looked at Wang Zicheng and the others with deep meaning, and also opened a teleportation gate, disappearing without a trace. Not long after Emperor Hong and the imperial preceptor left, a few bold people in the main tower also followed Wang Zicheng and the others and entered the sky above the imperial city, their eyes full of surprise. Similarly, Chapter 1399. The two continents had entered an era of communication. Qin Feiyang didn't care at all. There was a saying that went, counter soldiers with arms, water with an earthware. It was useless to worry all day, so it was better to face it calmly. On a mountain peak, Qin Feiyang and Old Man Qin stood side by side. Old Man Qin looked in the direction of the imperial city and frowned. Lu Xingchen is really Mu Tianyang? Qin Feiyang nodded. Then you have to be careful in the future. Cooperating with such a person is equivalent to asking a tiger for its skin. Old Man Qin said in a deep voice, full of worry. Qin Feiyang smiled and said, isn't he also asking a tiger for its skin by cooperating with me? You brat. Old Man Qin shook his head helplessly and said, you are very smart, but after all, you are still young. And Mu Tianyang, as the emperor of the previous dynasty, is on the same level as the late emperor. Without waiting for Old Man Qin to finish, Qin Feiyang said, but in the end, didn't he still lose to the ancestor? Old Man Qin said, the late emperor is the late emperor, and you are you. There is no comparison between you and the late emperor. I don't think so. I always believe that as long as I work hard, what the ancestor can do, I, Qin Feiyang, can also do. Qin Feiyang clenched his hands tightly, and his eyes were filled with a determined light. Seeing this, Old Man Qin couldn't help but shake his head with a hint of ridicule. In Old Man Qin's heart. No. In the hearts of everyone in the great Qin, the late emperor was an unsurpassable existence. He was the god of the great Qin. Therefore, in Old Man Qin's view, Qin Feiyang's thoughts were a little too naive. Qin Feiyang didn't take it to heart and said with a smile, there is still half a month before the miracle opens. Old man, where are you going during this time? Me. Old Man Qin fell silent. A moment later, he laughed self-deprecatingly and said, now this old man is already a traitor, where else can I go? Qin Feiyang sighed deeply and said with a smile, I do have a place, but I don't know if you are willing to go. Where? Old Man Qin. Ancient pagoda. Qin Feiyang said. Now that he was lacking false gods, if Old Man Qin was willing to enter the ancient pagoda, it would be like adding wings to a tiger. But that was only secondary. The main purpose of letting Old Man Qin enter the ancient castle was actually for Wang Yongfeng and the rest as well as the Thunder Leopard and the other two beasts. Wang Yongfeng and the others, as well as the Thunder Leopard and the other two beasts, had already reached the peak of the 9-star combat emperor realm. It was urgent for them to comprehend the ultimacy of becoming gods. But it was common knowledge. To comprehend the profound meaning of becoming a god was not an ordinary difficulty. Therefore, if they had the help of Old Man Qin, who was a ready-made fake god, they would definitely be able to comprehend it much faster than if they were to comprehend it on their own. Furthermore, they hadn't opened the door of potential yet, so they needed Old Man Qin's help. Ancient pagoda. Old Man Qin remained silent. Qin Feiyang smiled and said, don't worry, I won't restrict your freedom. You can leave or stay as you wish. Old Man Qin raised his head and looked at Qin Feiyang. Seeing Qin Feiyang's sincere expression, he nodded and smiled. All right, this old man is also very curious. What kind of spatial divine item is that ancient pagoda? But before we go to the ancient pagoda, can you let this old man take a look at your ancient castle first? Of course. Qin Feiyang was overjoyed. With a wave of his hand, the two of them entered the ancient castle. Greetings, Old Man Qin. Fatso, Wang Yongfeng and the others all stood up and bowed. Old Man Qin looked at them one by one. In the end, Old Man Qin's gaze locked onto Fatso, Wolf King, Lu Hong, and the pangolin beast who had followed Qin Feiyong since the beginning. His old eyes were filled with disbelief. These guys had actually already stepped into the combat emperor realm? Oh my god! How did they do it? Even if they had opened the gate of potential, it was impossible for them to be so fast. Qin Feiyong rolled his eyes and said with a mysterious smile, "Old Man Qin, tell me a secret, but you have to promise me that you won't tell anyone, including the emperor." Old Man Qin was startled. He turned to look at Qin Feiyong and asked suspiciously, "You're so cautious, what secret?" "Promise me first," Qin Feiyong said. "All right, this old man promises." Old Man Qin nodded. Qin Feiyong laughed. "Actually, the time rules inside this ancient castle are different from outside." "What do you mean?" Old Man Qin was puzzled. "What I mean is that there is a difference between the time here and the time outside. 10 days in the castle, 1 day outside." Fatso chuckled. "What?" Old Man Qin was dumbstruck. 10 days in the castle, only 1 day outside? What a joke. How could there be such a heaven-defying thing? However, when he looked at the others, he found that they were all serious and didn't seem to be joking at all. Old Man Qin swallowed his saliva, looked at Qin Feiyong and asked, "Really?" Qin Feiyong nodded. Old Man Qin's expression became dull again. He really couldn't accept it. This was simply too ridiculous. After a long time, Old Man Qin finally calmed down the shock in his heart and scanned the crowd. It turned out that this was the reason why everyone had improved so quickly. Phew! He let out a long sigh of relief, looked at Qin Feiyong and said, "Let's go to the ancient pagoda to take a look." "All right." Qin Feiyong nodded. Suddenly, he seemed to have thought of something, looked at Thunder Leopard, Wang Yongfeng and the others, and said, "You guys accompany Old Man Qin to the ancient pagoda." "What about you?" Thunder Leopard asked. "I suddenly remembered that I still have something to deal with." After Qin Feiyong finished speaking, he sent a sound transmission. "Make good use of it, because if you want to open the gate of potential, you will need Old Man Qin's help." As soon as they heard about the gate of potential, Thunder Leopard, Wang Yongfeng and the others couldn't help but become excited. Thunder Leopard thought to himself, "Don't worry, I will definitely take good care of him." Qin Feiyong smiled faintly, waved his hand, and the group immediately disappeared. Qin Feiyong also took an illusory form pill and turned into a middle-aged man. Then, he left the ancient castle, opened the teleportation gate, and directly entered the inner city. At the same time, Mu family. In the Great Council Hall, Lu Xingchen sat on the main seat, staring at Mu Chongyun and Mu Chongfeng who were standing opposite him, his face as gloomy as water. At the side, Mu Qing's hands were tightly clenched together, his eyes were bloodshot, and his entire body was filled with an astonishing amount of hostility. And opposite him, Mu Chongyun and Mu Chongfeng stood respectfully, their heads lowered, not daring to look at Lu Xingchen. The two supreme existences at the peak of the false god realm were like two children who had done something wrong in front of Lu Xingchen, terrified and uneasy. Bang! Suddenly, Lu Xingchen slammed his palm on the table and stood up. Mu Chongyun and Mu Chongfeng's bodies trembled, and they directly knelt on the ground, their faces full of panic. Lu Xingchen looked at the two coldly and said, "When Mu Qing returned from the 9 Nether Yellow Springs, did I ask him to tell you not to underestimate Qin Feiyong?" "Yes." The two nodded repeatedly. "Then tell me now, what exactly are you doing?" "The current patriarch has fallen into the hands of the main tower. The combat emperors in the family were all killed. Even Yiglao was buried in the endless ocean. Is this how you protect them?" Lu Xingchen roared, his hair standing on end. He never thought that the Mu family in the Forgotten Continent would be cheated so miserably by Qin Feiyong. Mu Chongfeng hurriedly said, "Father, we know our mistakes." Mu Chongyun also nodded repeatedly. "What's the use of knowing your mistakes now?" Lu Xingchen became even more furious. He took a step forward and slapped the two on the face. The two kneeled on the ground, covering their old faces and trembling. "You have disappointed me too much. When I asked you to bring your family to the Forgotten Continent, I wanted you to hide your strength and recuperate to prepare for the revival of the Heavenly Sun Empire. But now, apart from the two of you, what is left of the Mu family? What are you standing there for? Answer me!" Lu Xingchen roared. Mu Chongfeng's body trembled, and he said in a low voice, "The strongest people left now are combat saints." "I can't hear you, speak louder," Lu Xingchen shouted. Mu Chongfeng quivered and shouted, "Among the people left in the Mu family, the strongest is a 9-star combat saint." "The strongest is a 9-star combat saint." Lu Xingchen coldly looked at the two, and said, "Then tell me, with the strength of the Mu family now, how can we destroy the great Qin Empire?" The two lowered their heads, not daring to breathe loudly. Mu Qing glanced at Mu Chongfeng and Mu Xingchen before walking to Lu Xingchen's side. He cupped his hands and said, "My lord, you can't blame the two ancestors for this. It's all because Qin Feiyong is too hateful." "Qin Feiyong," Lu Xingchen muttered to himself, his eyes filled with murderous intent. From the time the two ancestors said, when Qin Feiyong came to the Forgotten Continent, it just so happened that Shen Mei was kidnapped by the imperial tutor. In my opinion, Shen Mei being kidnapped by the imperial tutor was most likely a trick set up by this bastard. Mu Qing said again. His tone was quite gloomy. "You mean, Qin Feiyong used Shen Mei to pin us down, so that we couldn't do anything else, and then took the opportunity to come to the Forgotten Continent to weaken the strength of the Mu family?" Lu Xingchen said. "That's right. While cooperating with us, he is also thinking of ways to deal with the Mu family. This bastard is really a despicable person." Mu Qing gnashed his teeth. "This debt, I will find him to settle it." Lu Xingchen coldly snorted, looking at the two, and said, "Mu Qing told me that the Mu family has given birth to many fake gods in these years. Where are they now?" Mu Chongfeng respectfully said, "They are guarding second uncle's remnant soul." Lu Xingchen said, "Did anything happen to second uncle's remnant soul these years?" "No," the two said. "Fortunately, there were no accidents, otherwise the two of you will not be able to atone for your sins even if you die. Immediately take me to second uncle's remnant soul." Lu Xingchen said. "Yes." The two respectfully responded, then got up, ready to take Lu Xingchen away. Seeing this, Mu Qing hurriedly grabbed Lu Xingchen's arm and asked, "Lord, what about my father? When are we going to save him?" "The foundation of the main tower is not as simple as you think. Even if all the fake gods of the Mu family are dispatched, they may not be able to save your father. Unless we can catch them off guard. Moreover, now that Qin Feiyong has been eyeing us covetously, the other fake gods of the Mu family should not be exposed to the world too early." Lu Xingchen said expressionlessly. "Then are we just going to ignore it?" Mu Qing's face was full of anxiety. "To achieve great things, someone must be sacrificed," Lu Xingchen said, his expression incomparably cold. Chapter 1400. Mu Chongfeng glanced at Mu Qing and said to Lu Xingchen telepathically, "Mu Qing's all-seeing eye is very important to the Mu family, so I think we can't ignore his father." "That's what I think too. He has already lost a sister. If he loses his father as well, I'm afraid he will be disheartened. They might even harbor grudges and resentment toward you and the Mu family." Mu Chongyun thought to himself. Lu Xingchen raised his eyebrows and looked at Mu Qing. "Well, for your sake, I'll try my best to save your father." "Really?" Mu Qing's spirit was lifted. "Yes." Lu Xingchen nodded. "Thank you, Lord." Mu Qing hurriedly kowtowed and thanked him. Lu Xingchen smiled and said, "Get up. You probably haven't seen my second brother's remnant soul, right? Come with me to take a look." "Yes." Mu Qing replied and stood respectfully behind Lu Xingchen. Lu Xingchen nodded to Mu Chongfeng and Mu Chongfeng. The two of them understood and immediately led Lu Xingchen and Mu Qing out of the meeting hall, disappearing in the other direction of the city like lightning. Clouds and mist lingered there. Even if one looked closely, nothing unusual would happen. However, as soon as Lu Xingchen and the other three entered the clouds and mist, they instantly disappeared without a trace. It was as if they had evaporated into thin air. At the same time, Chief Pagoda. At the top of a giant mountain. The Chief Pagoda Master stood at the edge of the cliff and looked at the space-time gate above the Pill Pagoda. His eyes flickered. Gong Sun Bei stood respectfully behind him and sighed. "I didn't expect Lord Snow Python to open a passage between the Imperial Capital and the Central Divine Kingdom. In the future, whether it's the Central Divine Kingdom or the Great Qin's Imperial Capital, I'm afraid that both will fall into chaos." His face was full of worry. The Chief Pagoda Master said, "This is inevitable, but it's also a good thing for us." "A good thing?" Gong Sunbei was suspicious. Chief Pagoda Master said, "Let's wait for Elder Wang to return." Whoosh! Before his voice faded, Wang Su cut through the sky and landed directly on the mountain peak. "How is it?" Chief Pagoda Master asked. Wang Su said, "This old man saw Emperor Hong, the son of Emperor Qin, and Great Qin's imperial preceptor." "What? The Qin emperor actually has a son who is still alive?" Gong Sunbei was shocked. Chief Pagoda Master's face also sank slightly. He asked, "What is the cultivation level of this Emperor Hong?" "Very strong. According to this old man's analysis, it should be similar to Mu Chongfeng," Wang Su said in a deep voice. "If that's the case, he's a heavenly semi-divinity realm cultivator," the Chief Pagoda Master muttered. His eyes flashed as he asked, "Then what is their relationship with Qin Feiyang?" Although it's only been a short time, it's not hard to tell from their expressions that they don't have a good impression of Qin Feiyang, Wang Mo said. Gong Sunbei said, "Wait, Emperor Hong is the son of Emperor Qin, and Qin Feiyang is also a descendant of Emperor Qin. Moreover, he received Emperor Qin's teachings. How could Emperor Hong not have a good impression of Qin Feiyang?" "This old man is not sure." Wang Su shook his head. Chief Pagoda Master sneered, "It seems that the situation in the Great Qin Empire is also very chaotic." Wang Su asked, "Then, should we send someone to the imperial capital to investigate?" "No need. Wang Zicheng and the others have already entered the imperial capital. I believe that the matter of Great Qin will soon spread to the Central Divine Kingdom." Chief Pagoda Master smiled. Gong Sunbei heard this and asked calmly, "My lord, what exactly do you want to do?" "What do I want to do? Qin Feiyang has schemed against my Chief Pagoda time and time again. Of course, I can't just let it go like this." Chief Pagoda Master sneered, killing intent surging in his eyes. Sigh. When will revenge breeds revenge? Gong Sunbei sighed inwardly. However, he also knew that he couldn't control Chief Pagoda Master. "That's right. This old man also discovered something," Wang Su said. "What is it?" Chief Pagoda Master asked. "Mu Zhongyun brought a young man into the Forgotten Continent," Wang Su said. Chief Pagoda Master said, "Gong Sunbei and I have been here all this time, and we also saw that young man. Is there a problem with him?" "Yes. And there's a big problem with him. This young man only has the cultivation of a combat emperor, but Mu Zhongyun was very respectful when he saw him. It gave this old man the feeling that he was seeing his ancestor," Wang Su said in a deep voice. "What? There's actually such a thing?" Chief Pagoda Master's expression changed. Gong Sunbei also had a look of disbelief. After coming back to his senses, Chief Pagoda Master immediately looked at Gong Sunbei and Wang Su and said, "Investigate immediately. You must find out his identity." Gong Sunbei frowned and said, "He went to the Mu family. How are we going to investigate?" "Although he went to the Mu family, he's still a person of Great Qin. I believe that there must be someone in the imperial capital who knows his identity. I have a feeling that if this person isn't eliminated as soon as possible, he will bring disaster to our Chief Pagoda sooner or later," Chief Pagoda Master said in a deep voice. "Is it that exaggerated?" Wang Su frowned. Gong Sunbei asked, "Then I'll send someone to the imperial capital to investigate now?" Chief Pagoda Master nodded. Inner City. A burly man stood in front of the gate of a martial marquis's mansion. He didn't say a word, as if he was waiting for something. However, the burly man's cultivation wasn't high. He was only a 3-star war sect. There were 3 guards on both sides of the gate. They were all curiously sizing up the burly man, but at the same time, they were also on guard. Not long after, a guard walked out from inside and stood on the steps. He looked down at the burly man and said, "The Marquis has agreed to see you. Follow me." The burly man's eyes flashed as he followed the guard in. Inside the Marquis's mansion, there was a garden, a pavilion, a small bridge, and flowing water. It was quite elegant and quiet. In a corridor, a guard led the way and asked, "May I ask who you are? Why do you want to see the Marquis?" The burly man laughed. "This has nothing to do with you." Hearing this, the guard's face immediately darkened. He turned and stared at the burly man, a cold light flashing in his eyes. The burly man chuckled and said, Did I say anything wrong? I'm looking for Marquis Xiao. It has nothing to do with you. It has nothing to do with me. But if you die here, I'll report to the Marquis. It's just a lunatic who came. I don't think the Marquis will ask anything. The guard sneered. The burly man was startled for a moment, then suddenly grinned. You have guts, you dare to threaten me. The guard was silent and only looked at him coldly. The burly man said indifferently, Speak, what exactly do you want? The guard looked around, and seeing that there was no one around, he said in a deep voice, I just want to know who you are. The burly man raised his eyebrows without leaving a trace. A mere guard actually tried to inquire about his identity. This clearly didn't make sense. The burly man asked, Did the Marquis of Xiao tell you to do this? Don't worry about that. The guard's arrogance was very arrogant. The burly man smiled helplessly and said, All right, my name is Nie Shan. I'm an ordinary citizen of the 3rd district. The guard said, Why would an ordinary citizen come looking for the Marquis? The burly man said, I have some private matters to report to the Marquis of Xiao. What private matter? The guard asked. Didn't you say you only wanted to know my identity? Now that I've told you my identity, why are you still asking so much? The burly man frowned, obviously losing his patience. The guard's gaze turned cold as he shouted, If I tell you to speak, then speak. What nonsense are you spouting? The burly man sized up the guard. The guard also stared at the burly man sinisterly, but gradually, the guard's expression became somewhat unnatural, as if he had done something wrong, giving people a feeling of guilt. The burly man's eyes flashed. A guard asking all sorts of questions, no matter how he looked at it, it didn't seem normal. Shwa! Suddenly, the burly man waved his hand, and the guard felt his body lighten. In the next moment, he appeared in an unfamiliar stone room. Moreover, this stone room was completely sealed off. Where is this? The guard looked around in bewilderment. Suddenly, he saw a group of people and berserk beasts in the stone room. Among them, the most eye-catching ones were a fatso and a wolf. How could it be you? The guard looked at Fatso and the wolf, his face full of panic. Fatso said, Is it strange? This used to be our territory. Is this place? It's the castle. The guard's face changed greatly, turning his head to look at the burly man, his face full of fear, exclaiming, You are Qin Feiyang. Yes, it's me. The burly man nodded. The guard immediately knelt on the ground begging, Young Master Qin, I have eyes but failed to see. Please be magnanimous and forgive me this time. Qin Feiyang laughed. If you have eyes but failed to see, I will definitely not bother with you. What do you mean? The guard panicked and asked nervously. Don't you understand? Then let me tell you. Although I have changed my appearance and you can't recognize me, but your Marquis has already agreed to see me, so I am your Marquis guest. But you actually asked me again and again about my identity, and even forced me to tell you the purpose of looking for your Marquis. Tell me, which god of the House of Marquis has such guts? The most important thing is that when you asked me these questions, you still chose a place where there was no third person. Doesn't this show that there are many problems with you? Qin Feiyang laughed. The guard's face was gloomy. Just based on these, you can actually see that there is a problem with me. Qin Feiyang is indeed Qin Feiyang. Since you have already seen through me, then go to hell. Suddenly, the guard laughed sinisterly and suddenly jumped up. His aura erupted as he punched towards Qin Feiyang's mind. What? 9-star War Emperor. Fatso and the others' expressions changed. Unexpectedly, this person was actually hiding his cultivation. Wolf King shouted, Little Qin Zi, quickly throw him out. If the Thunder Leopard, the 3 beasts, and Wang Yongfeng were still here, even if this person was a 9-star War Emperor, they would not be moved. But now, everyone went to the ancient pagoda. With their current strength, they could not stop this person at all. When I kill you, none of the people and beasts around you will live. The god laughed sinisterly. I'm afraid you don't have the ability. Qin Feiyang smiled contemptuously and waved his hand. The guard immediately disappeared. At this time, only then did everyone breathe a sigh of relief. Fatso asked, Where did you send him? Have you seen any god of the House of Marquis with a 9-star War Emperor cultivation? So of course, I sent him to the ancient pagoda and interrogated him clearly. Qin Feiyang said with a faint smile. Fatso and the others looked at each other and couldn't help but laugh. What kind of place was the ancient pagoda? That was Qin Feiyong's current headquarters, and all the experts around him were inside. It was no exaggeration to say that whoever wanted to enter the ancient pagoda was equivalent to entering a dragon's pool and tiger's den. Chapter 1401. At the same time. An ancient tower. Above a mountain range. A guard appeared out of thin air. Looking at the unfamiliar landscape, his face was filled with bewilderment. Where was this? What was going on? Where was Qin Feiyong? Roar. Suddenly, a series of deafening beast roars sounded. The guard was shocked. He lowered his head and scanned the mountains and rivers below. His eyes were suddenly filled with horror. He saw more than a dozen ferocious-looking beasts flying out of the jungle and standing in mid-air. They raised their heads and looked at him curiously. The aura that these beasts exuded was that of a 9-star combat emperor. Why are there so many 9-star emperor beasts? The guard's face was dull. Below. A beast looked at the guard and asked suspiciously, "Is he also Boss Qin's guest?" "He doesn't look like one. He looks shifty-eyed." Another beast shook its head, looking charmingly naive. "This is your fault. How can you judge a book by its cover? Although he looks ugly, what if he has a beautiful heart?" Another beast said, "Keep bragging. In this world, other than Boss Qin, which human isn't a cunning old fox?" Wrong. Boss Qin is also very cunning, but his cunning is targeted at outsiders. Stop talking. This guy is definitely not a good person. Let's be careful. The group of ferocious beasts looked at the guards warily while commenting. And they didn't transmit their voice. The guards heard every single word. "I look shifty-eyed?" His face suddenly darkened and he shouted, "You're courting death." The group of beasts was stunned. Boom. The guard took a step forward, and a terrifying aura rushed towards the group of ferocious beasts with an overwhelming force. "Are you sure you want to make a move?" A beast looked at him strangely. "Why? Do you think you have the advantage because you have more people?" The guard looked disdainful. Although these beasts were all 9-star combat emperors, he was confident that he could kill this group of beasts with his perfect battle art. Hee. The group of beasts immediately laughed. "What's the situation?" Seeing this, the guard was surprised. Suddenly, one of the beasts roared, "Brothers, someone wants to bully us. Come and help." His voice was like a great bell, resounding in all directions. Roar. Immediately, deafening roars rang out one after another from the surrounding mountains and rivers. What? The guard scanned the surrounding mountains and rivers in shock. "Who dares to bully us? Do you want to die?" "Humph. This emperor wants to see who has the guts to come to our territory and cause trouble." Following a series of furious roars, several ferocious beasts dashed out from the mountain. Some were as big as mountains, while others were as small as boulders. This. The god was dumbfounded. 5, 10, 20, 40. How could there be so many 9-star monarch beasts? And it wasn't over yet. There were even more 9-star monarch beasts flying over from the void in the distance. They were densely packed and majestic. It was simply shocking. "What did you just say?" "We didn't hear you clearly. Say it again." "Don't worry, we won't beat you up." Those ferocious beasts that appeared at the beginning stared at the guard playfully at this moment. The guard stammered and his face turned pale. "Say it. What's wrong? Are you scared? Where's your arrogance just now?" Facing the clamoring of a group of ferocious beasts, the guard didn't dare to say a word. His heart was drowned in deep fear. The other ferocious beasts flew over and directly surrounded the guard without saying a word. Their eyes were filled with astonishing ferocity. "We have the numbers. What can you do? Come. We are courting death. Come and kill us if you have the guts." "Why? Have you lost your temper? If you don't do it, then we will. Don't blame us for being too heavy-handed later." "Brothers, beat him up." A group of ferocious beasts suddenly swarmed forward. "No!" The god howled in despair. In less than 3 breaths, his sea of chi was destroyed by a group of ferocious beasts. His entire body was dripping with blood and he was in a sorry state. "Don't beat him up. Don't beat him up. If he's really Boss Qin's guest and we beat him to death, Boss Qin will be angry. Seeing that the situation wasn't good, the dozen or so ferocious beasts that appeared first repeatedly shouted, "Damn! You guys didn't even figure out whether he's Boss Qin's guest or enemy, and you guys called us here to beat him up. Aren't you just trying to harm us?" The beasts that came later immediately glared at the dozen or so ferocious beasts. Well, the dozen or so beasts were quite embarrassed. Suddenly, a burly man appeared in the sky. It was Qin Feiyong. When he saw the guard in a sorry state, he couldn't help but be stunned. Then he looked at the group of beasts and said, "You guys did this? Who are you?" The group of beasts looked at Qin Feiyong suspiciously. Because Qin Feiyong had changed his appearance, they didn't recognize him. "It's me." Qin Feiyong took a facial restoration pill and restored his true appearance. "So it's Boss Qin." The group of beasts suddenly realized. "Boss Qin, is this person your guest or your enemy?" One of the ferocious beasts asked nervously. The other beasts were also very nervous. "Guest? Enemy?" Qin Feiyong was stunned. He looked at the guard and the group of beasts suspiciously and suddenly understood. Cough. He coughed and said with a straight face, "He's my guest. How can you be so rude to him?" "Ah! Your guest. This? Sorry, it's our fault. The group of beasts suddenly lowered their heads. Their eyes were full of panic, like a group of children who had done something wrong. Qin Feiyong continued with a straight face, "Beating my guest like this, you guys are too bold. Tell me, how should I punish you now?" "Don't. We didn't do it on purpose." Yeah. "It's not our fault. He's too arrogant. As soon as he came in, he said he wanted to kill us. We can't just sit and wait for death." The group of beasts felt wronged. Puff. Qin Feiyong couldn't help but laugh. "Boss Qin, what are you laughing at?" The beasts looked at him suspiciously. "You know what? You guys are too cute right now. I'm just teasing you guys. This person is not my guest." Qin Feiyong laughed. "Teasing us?" The group of beasts looked at each other. "Boss Qin, how can you do this? Don't you know that this will scare us to death?" When they came back to their senses, the beasts immediately stared at Qin Feiyong with dissatisfaction and kept complaining. Qin Feiyong shook his head and waved his hand. Okay, it's my fault. I apologize to you guys. Now get out of the way. I have something to ask him. You have to compensate us for the mental damage." Yes. Our little sweetheart was almost scared to death by you just now." All the beasts groaned in agreement. "Are you guys so timid?" Qin Feiyong rolled his eyes. The guard whose cultivation was crippled was imprisoned in the void by a beast. At this moment, he was staring at Qin Feiyong with resentment. Qin Feiyong walked to the front of the guard, shook his head, and smiled. "You're really bold. You actually dare to be arrogant here. Don't talk nonsense. If you want to kill me, then do it." The god laughed sinisterly. "You want to die? It's not up to you now." Qin Feiyong chuckled, took out a facial restoration pill, and directly stuffed it into the guard's mouth. The guard's face and figure suddenly distorted. Soon, a rough face appeared in Qin Feiyong's sight. Qin Feiyong looked at the guard. This was a burly man. He was more than 9 meters tall, like a small giant. The muscles all over his body bulged like dragons, full of explosive power. There's indeed a problem. Qin Feiyong's eyes flashed with a cold light, his hands formed a seal, and the enslavement seal appeared, instantly entering the burly man's head. Ah! The burly man howled miserably, incomparably mournful. After controlling the burly man, Qin Feiyong asked, "Tell me, who are you? Pretending to be the guard of Marquis Xiao, what is your purpose?" The burly man laughed sinisterly. "I won't say it even if you beat me to death." "So unafraid of death?" Qin Feiyong was surprised. Originally, he thought that he could get the answer from the burly man's inner thoughts, but he didn't expect that this person was now bent on seeking death. After pondering for a while, Qin Feiyong raised his arm, reached into the burly man's arms, and took out a Xueqi bag. The burly man sneered, "Don't waste your time, there's nothing inside." Qin Feiyong didn't believe it, and lowered his head to check carefully. In the end, in this person's Xueqi bag, other than some daily necessities, medicinal herbs, pills, and gold coins, He really couldn't find anything that could prove this person's identity. Qin Feiyong was silent for a moment, and a light suddenly flashed past his eyes. He raised his head to look at the burly man and laughed. Actually, your identity is not difficult to guess. Then why don't you guess? The burly man looked at him with a face full of ridicule. The 9-star war emperor of the Great Qin are basically gathered in the Imperial Palace, War God Shrine, Law Enforcement Hall, and the various Martial Marquis Palace. And you pretended to be a god and lurked beside the Marquis of Shao. You should be monitoring him. But as far as I know, the Marquis of Shao is an upright and low-key person. He rarely has any grudges with others, so the various Martial Marquis Palace can be excluded. Then only the Imperial Palace, War God Shrine, and Law Enforcement Hall are left. I remember that in the Central Plaza, because of the matter between me and the Emperor, the Marquis of Shao repeatedly raised objections to the Imperial Tutor. I think that with the Imperial Tutor's personality, he will definitely hold a grudge. In addition, the Imperial Palace, War God Shrine, and Law Enforcement Hall are all under the control of the Imperial Tutor. Therefore, I speculate that you are one of the Imperial Tutor's men. Qin Feiyong said, his eyes shining. The burly man's gaze trembled, and there was a trace of disbelief on his face. Looking at your expression, it seems that my guess is not wrong. Since you are one of the Imperial Tutor's men, then it won't be difficult to find out your identity. Qin Feiyong smiled faintly, took out the image crystal, and surged with battle chi. Bas. Not long later, Yan Wei's shadow appeared. The burly man looked at Yan Wei. His face suddenly changed, and instinctively cried out, "How could it be him? You know Yan Wei? Then it seems that he should be from the Law Enforcement Hall." Qin Feiyong muttered. Chapter 1402. Qin Feiyong could see Yan Wei's worry and laughed. "Don't worry, he is already my prisoner. Even if he knows that you are my man, he will not be able to tell the Imperial Tutor." Prisoner? Yan Wei was slightly startled, then heaved a sigh of relief. Qin Feiyong's men? The burly man was also stunned, and then shouted at Yan Wei. "You are actually a spy that Qin Feiyong placed by Sir's side. You really deserve to die." Yan Wei laughed disdainfully, looked at Qin Feiyong and asked, "Where did you catch him?" Qin Feiyong said, "Marquis Shao's house." I never thought that the Imperial Tutor would really make a move on the Marquis of Shao. Yan Wei frowned. "What do you mean?" Qin Feiyong was suspicious. When the young prince inherited the throne, the Marquis of Shao continuously raised objections. This made the Imperial Tutor very dissatisfied, and he even personally told me that he wanted to deal with the Marquis of Shao. I originally thought that he would leave this matter to me, but I didn't expect that this person would go. This person is called Gu Yong, and he is also one of the Imperial Tutor's most trusted aides. Yan Wei explained. After hearing this, the corner of Qin Feiyong's mouth lifted slightly. He did not expect that when he came to find the Marquis of Shao, he would actually capture one of the Imperial Tutor's trusted aides. This was truly an unexpected surprise. It was no wonder that this person's bones were so hard, and he would rather die than submit. Qin Feiyong waved his hand at Yan Wei and said, "All right, you can go back to work." "All right." Yan Wei nodded, looked at Gu Yong, and then looked at Qin Feiyong worriedly, and said, "This person, we must not let him return to the Imperial Tutor's side alive." "You don't have to worry at all." Qin Feiyong laughed, and with that, he turned off the image crystal, and then appeared in the castle with Gu Yong in hand. "Boss, since the Imperial Tutor wants to deal with the Marquis of Shao, then why didn't he directly get rid of the Marquis of Shao? Isn't that a little redundant?" As soon as Qin Feiyong appeared, Fatso asked suspiciously. "Redundant?" The various martial marquises have the protection of their ancestors. No matter how bold the Imperial advisor is, he would not dare to kill a martial marquis. Qin Feiyong said. "Then we can assassinate him. With the Imperial Preceptor's ability, it should be very easy," Fatso said. "It is very easy." However, when the Marquis of Shao raised his objection in the central square, all the civil and military officials saw it. Don't look at those civil and military officials. They usually seem weak, incompetent, and timid, but they are all very shrewd. They all know in their hearts that the Marquis of Shao had angered the Imperial advisor. If the Marquis of Shao is assassinated at this time, then there will definitely be people who suspect the Imperial advisor. At this critical juncture, The Imperial Preceptor does not dare to take this risk. Qin Feiyong sneered. I see. Fatso was suddenly enlightened. He looked at Gu Yong and asked, then how should we deal with this person? He's still useful. Keep an eye on him. Don't let him find a chance to commit suicide. Qin Feiyong instructed before changing back to his previous appearance. Concealing his cultivation, he appeared in the corridor of the Marquis's mansion. He looked around and walked towards the end of the corridor. Not long after, a garden entered his line of sight. In the garden, there was a 17 or 18-year-old woman. She wore a light green dress and had long black hair that draped over her shoulders. She had an exquisite figure and looked youthful and beautiful. The woman was squatting in a field of flowers, fiddling with a few wild flowers. At the side, there were two maids accompanying him. Qin Feiyong looked at the woman and entered the garden. Who are you? Seeing Qin Feiyong, the two maids immediately became vigilant. The green-clothed woman also raised her head to look at Qin Feiyong, her bright eyes carrying a trace of suspicion and curiosity. Qin Feiyong walked to the front of the three of them, looked at the green-clothed woman, cupped his hands and smiled. I am Ye Shan. I have something to discuss with the Marquis of Shao. I hope Miss can guide me. To see father? The green-clothed woman was taken aback. She stood up and looked at Qin Feiyong. She asked suspiciously, is there no one to lead the way for you? So it's the daughter of the Marquis of Shao. Qin Feiyong muttered and laughed. Just now there was a guard leading the way, but halfway there, he seemed to have something to do and left. He pointed me in the direction and told me to look for him, but this Marquis's mansion is too big. I really don't know where to find the Marquis of Shao. They actually dare to neglect father's guests. These guards are getting more and more presumptuous. Hearing this, the green-clothed woman's delicate face was filled with anger. She then looked at Qin Feiyong and laughed. It just so happens that I'm going to pay my respects to father. Why don't you come with me? That's exactly what I want. Qin Feiyong was overjoyed and laughed. Please. The green-clothed woman extended her hand. Miss, please go first. Qin Feiyong said. The green-clothed woman smiled and turned around to walk towards a lake in the distance. The two maids glanced at Qin Feiyong and hurriedly followed. Qin Feiyong raised his eyebrows and looked behind him unhurriedly. Looking at the backs of the two maids, his eyes flashed with an inexplicable light. Previously, when the two maids looked at him, he sensed a flash of killing intent, which disappeared in an instant. Although this killing intent was not obvious and disappeared very quickly, but with his keen perception, he was completely sure that this killing intent had indeed appeared. However, because the time was too short, he did not clearly distinguish which maid this killing intent came from. This Marquis's mansion is really interesting. Qin Feiyong looked away from the two maids and scanned the surroundings. A playful look gradually crept up on his face. Not long after, Qin Feiyong followed the green-clothed woman to the lake. The lake was about half a mile long. The clear lake water was rippling in the wind. It was very quiet here. The surrounding vegetation was lush and full of vitality. On the east side of the lake, a courtyard quietly sat by the lake. At this moment, outside the courtyard, a middle-aged man in a purple robe was sitting alone at a stone table. He was drinking tea while looking at the surface of the lake. He looked like he had a lot on his mind. That's right. This person was Marquis Shao. Father is over there. The green-clothed woman said to Qin Feiyong and trotted towards the middle-aged man. At the same time she exclaimed, Father! The green-clothed woman's voice awakened Marquis Shao. He raised his head to look at the green-clothed woman. His weather-beaten face suddenly revealed a trace of doting. However, when he looked at Qin Feiyong, there was a trace of suspicion in his eyes. Soon, the four of them walked in front of Marquis Shao. Greetings, Marquis. The two maids bowed. Greetings, Marquis Shao. Qin Feiyong also cupped his hands and bowed. Yes. Marquis Shao nodded, looked at Qin Feiyong and asked, Are you the person that the guard mentioned before? Yes. Qin Feiyong nodded. Marquis Shao asked, Why are you looking for this Marquis? This. Qin Feiyong glanced at the green-clothed woman and the two maids. As a Marquis, how could he not understand what Qin Feiyong meant? He said indifferently, There are no outsiders here. If you have something to say, just say it. That's not necessarily true. Qin Feiyong said meaningfully. Marquis Xiao raised his eyebrows and pointed to the green-clothed woman. She is this Marquis's daughter, you still don't believe me? Qin Feiyang said, Marquis's daughter, naturally there's no problem. What do you mean? According to what you said, there's a problem with my two maids. Don't be too presumptuous. They grew up with me. Although they are my maids on the surface, we are actually like sisters. The green-clothed woman said angrily. Kai, don't be rude. Marquis Xiao berated, looked at Qin Feiyang and said, if you have something to say, then say it quickly, otherwise this Marquis will give the order to leave. Sigh. Marquis is in danger right now, but he doesn't know about it at all. How sad. Qin Feiyang sighed. Impudent. Marquis Xiao suddenly stood up, and a terrifying emperor's might pressed towards Qin Feiyang. Qin Feiyang's eyes flashed. He suddenly turned around and rushed towards the two maids. What are you doing? The two maids immediately retreated in fear. The green-clothed woman's expression also changed, and she shouted, Father, quickly stop him. Marquis Xiao was furious, and slapped towards Qin Feiyang's back. But Qin Feiyang ignored him, stared at the two maids and muttered, Let's see how long you can hide. Boom. The aura of a 5-star war emperor suddenly erupted. What? So strong? Marquis Xiao was shocked, and immediately used his full strength, the battle qi in his palms surging out. At the same time, Qin Feiyang had already arrived in front of the two maids, raised his hands, and grabbed towards the two maids' heads. His 10 fingers were bent like 2 eagle claws. Red sword qi lingered around, emitting a terrifying sharpness. The two maids' faces turned pale, but they did not retaliate. Qin Feiyang looked at them and laughed sinisterly. If you continue to endure, you will only die. Before he could finish, one of the maids' eyes flashed with a hint of struggle, and then a terrifying emperor's might rushed out from her body. It was the 9-star war emperor. How is this possible? The other maid, the green-clothed woman, looked at the maid in shock. Marquis Xiao also braked and stopped behind Qin Feiyang, his face full of shock and bewilderment. The maid glanced at Marquis Xiao, stared at Qin Feiyang sinisterly, and said, You dare to destroy my plan, no matter who you are? You must die today. Finished. She raised her arm like lightning and slapped Qin Feiyang's chest with her palm. With just you? Qin Feiyang laughed disdainfully and retreated a step. At the same time, with a thought, Thunder Leopard and the other two beasts appeared in front of him out of thin air. What's going on? Facing this sudden turn of events, Thunder Leopard and the other two beasts were stunned. It's them. Could this person be? At the same time, seeing Thunder Leopard and the other two beasts appear, Marquis Xiao and the maid's expressions changed. They immediately looked at Qin Feiyang, and a terrifying name appeared in their minds at the same time. Qin Feiyang. Qin Feiyang shouted, Stop talking nonsense, quickly cripple her. Cripple who? Thunder Leopard and the other two beasts turned to look at Qin Feiyang with dumbfounded expressions. They couldn't hear anything from the inside of the ancient pagoda, so even now, they still hadn't figured out what was going on. Her. Qin Feiyang pointed at the maid. Thunder Leopard and the other two beasts looked at the maid, their eyes suddenly bursting with an astonishing ferocious light. Although he didn't know what was going on, the person that Qin Feiyang wanted to kill was definitely an enemy. Seeing this, the maid turned around and fled. Heh! Thunder Leopard grinned, turned into the power of thunder, and instantly caught up to the maid, slapping her back with his claws. Ah! The maid let out a blood-curdling scream and fell into the lake below, splashing up huge waves. Thunder Leopard stood in the air, looked at the lake with contempt, and said, Second brother, third brother, I'll leave the rest to you guys. Let's end this quickly. Qin Feiyang added. Don't worry. We don't need 5 breaths of time to end the battle. After all, we are from the Sea of Samsara. Fighting in the water is our forte. Chapter 1403. Boom. Crash. At the bottom of the lake, a series of earth-shattering sounds rang out. On the surface of the lake, waves covered the sky. The entire house of Marquis was trembling violently. Cracks spread out in all directions with the lake as the center. Qin Feiyang, tell your 2 subordinates to hurry up, or else the house of Marquis will be destroyed. Seeing this scene, Marquis Xiao was burning with anxiety. But before he could finish his sentence, the battle fluctuations subsided. Dong. The seal and leopard brought a bloody woman out of the lake and landed in front of Qin Feiyang. I said it won't take 5 breaths, so it won't take 5 breaths. Done. Seahorse said with a triumphant smile. Very good. Qin Feiyang nodded. Whoosh. At this moment, accompanied by the sound of something tearing through the air, the guards of the house of Marquis rushed over. Qin Feiyang looked at Marquis Xiao and said indifferently, "You should know what to say, right?" Marquis Xiao took a deep look at Qin Feiyang and nodded. "I know." Qin Feiyang waved his hand and disappeared without a trace with the 3 beasts and the woman. Not long after, the guards of the house of Marquis rushed over. When they saw the lake that was filled with cracks, their expressions changed drastically. A guard captain asked, "Marquis, what's going on?" Marquis Xiao laughed. "Just now, this Marquis was teaching Kai how to cultivate and accidentally made some noise. Everyone, don't panic." Teaching the young miss to cultivate? The group of guards were stunned. The guard captain smiled bitterly. "Marquis, you don't have to make such a big commotion when teaching the young miss to cultivate, do you? We thought that a strong enemy had come to invade." "I've made you worry. If there's nothing else, you can leave first." Marquis Xiao smiled apologetically and waved his hand. "Yes." The captain of the guards respectfully replied and left with a group of guards. But just as the group of guards left, another figure descended above the lake. Marquis Xiao raised his head and his expression immediately changed. He bowed and said, "Greetings, Imperial Advisor." That's right. The person who came was the Imperial Advisor. He came really fast. Inside the castle, Qin Feiyang's eyes flashed. Then, he steered the ancient castle and flew away silently. The Imperial Advisor glanced at the lake, looked at the Marquis of Xiao and said with a frown, "Just now, I heard a very strong battle fluctuation coming from you. What happened?" Marquis Xiao said, "Thank you for your concern, Lord State Preceptor. I was just teaching my daughter cultivation just now. There's nothing else." "Really?" The Grand Master looked at the green-clothed woman. The woman in green nodded. She looked slightly flustered. This was an instinctive fear of the Imperial Preceptor. The Imperial Preceptor sized up the two of them and suddenly released his divine sense. It surged out in all directions and instantly enveloped the entire Marquis residence. Soon, his face suddenly darkened. Unexpectedly, he did not sense Guiyong's aura at all. Could it be that the shockwaves from the previous battle were related to Guiyong and his companion? However, he did not say anything. He coldly glanced at the Marquis of Xiao Wu, then opened the teleportation gate and left. Only when the teleportation gate dissipated did Marquis Xiao let out a sigh of relief. The woman in green asked, "Father, isn't this Imperial Preceptor too concerned about us?" Marquis Xiao said in a deep voice, "It's not as simple as you think." "What do you mean?" The green-clothed woman was suspicious. That maid's identity had just been exposed by Qin Feiyang, and the Imperial Preceptor had already arrived at our Marquis residence. "What does this mean?" "It means that the Imperial Preceptor has been paying attention to the movements of our Marquis residence. I guess that maid is most likely a spy that the Imperial Preceptor planted by your side," Marquis Xiao said. "What? Why would he do that?" The green-clothed woman's expression changed. The remaining maidservant was also shocked. "Why else?" "It must be because I repeatedly raised objections to Emperor Hong in the central square and angered him." Marquis Xiao coldly snorted. "This old thing is too much." The green-clothed woman's face was filled with anger, and her bright eyes were filled with disgust. His Majesty Hao Tian is young and ignorant, and is unable to handle state affairs. As for Emperor Hong, he lives in seclusion and has no intention of managing these things. Right now, the person controlling the power behind the scenes is the Imperial Preceptor. In the past, when His Majesty was still alive, the Imperial Preceptor dared to deceive everyone, let alone now. Marquis Xiao sighed deeply. He couldn't help but worry about the future of the great Qin. "To be able to hear your words, it's not a waste of my trip." Suddenly, Qin Feiyang's voice sounded in the air. Following closely, Qin Feiyang and the 3 thunder leopard beasts appeared beside Marquis Xiao. Marquis Xiao was startled and asked, "Why didn't the Imperial Preceptor notice you?" Qin Feiyang said, "As soon as I saw the Imperial Preceptor appear, I left." Marquis Xiao said, "You knew that he would use his divine sense to find you?" "He's not looking for me. He's looking for his lackeys. Qin Feiyong waved his hand, and Gu Yong and the maid appeared in front of Marquis Xiao. Both of them had their qis crippled and were dripping with blood. Marquis Xiao sized up Gu Yong and asked in surprise, "Who is he?"
Qin Feiyong said, "He is the god who came to report to you before."
"How could this be?" Marquis Xiao's face was lifeless. "When he brought me to see you, he asked me about my identity and my purpose for coming to find you. At that time, I felt that there was something wrong with him."
As expected, when I crippled his qi and interrogated him, he was one of the Imperial Preceptor's men,
Qin Feiyong said. "Damn it!" When Marquis Xiao heard this, he flew into a rage.
The green-clothed woman asked, "Then how did you know that there was a problem with this maid?"
Qin Feiyong asked, "Do you remember the first time we met?" The green-clothed woman nodded. "It was at that time that a trace of killing intent appeared when she looked at me. But at that time she concealed it very well. I was unable to determine which maid this killing intent came from. However, if there is killing intent, it means that there must be a problem with one of them." Qin Feiyong said. "Killing intent?" The green-clothed woman was stunned. "Then why didn't I sense it at that time?" Qin Feiyong was stunned, not knowing how to answer. Marquis Xiao said helplessly, "Kai, don't mess around. You and Qin Feiyong are not on the same level at all. What he can sense, even father might not be able to sense, let alone you." The green-clothed woman smiled embarrassedly and then stared at Qin Feiyong without blinking. Her moving eyes were filled with curiosity. What kind of man was this? Marquis Xiao took a deep breath and bowed to Qin Feiyong, saying, "Thank you. If it wasn't for you, I'm afraid I wouldn't have known that there were two biting dogs hiding by my side." Marquis Xiao was also a smart person.
After knowing the identities of the two, he knew the intentions of the Imperial Preceptor.
Qin Feiyong had saved his life. No.
He had saved his entire house of Marquis.
It's just a small matter. Qin Feiyong smiled faintly as he glanced at the other maid. "Then what should we do with them now?" Marquis Xiao glanced at Gu Yong and the other two, then looked at Qin Feiyong and asked.
Qin Feiyong said indifferently, "You can do whatever you want."
"These damn things should be thrown into the lake to feed the fish." Killing intent flashed in Marquis Xiao's eyes. He reached out with both hands and directly twisted Gu Yong and the other two's necks. Then, like throwing trash, he threw them into the lake. Qin Feiyong glanced at the lake, then looked at the other maid and said, "She can't be left alive either." The maid's expression changed. She hurriedly ran behind the green-clothed woman and looked at Qin Feiyong in fear. "Don't be afraid, I will protect you." The green-clothed woman comforted her and glared at Qin Feiyong. "Why?" Marquis Xiao was also puzzled. "The Imperial Preceptor has already set his eyes on you."
The Imperial Preceptor must have already discovered the deaths of Gu Yong and the other two.
"So, he will definitely think of a way to investigate this matter," Qin Feiyong said. Marquis Xiao frowned. He looked at the maid and said, "You mean the Imperial Preceptor will make a move on her?" "That's right."
Until the last moment, the Imperial Preceptor would not dare to make a move on you and your daughter.
"Then, she is the only one left, because she is the only one who knows," Qin Feiyong said. The green-clothed woman said, "Don't worry, she won't say anything." Yes. I will definitely keep my mouth shut." The maid also nodded her head. Qin Feiyong looked at the maid and said, "When you fall into the hands of the Imperial Preceptor, it will not be up to you to decide whether you want to say it or not. Next." He then looked at Marquis Xiao and said, "You are also clear about my current situation. If the Imperial Preceptor knows that I came to find you, then even if you have 100 mouths, you won't be able to clear your suspicions." Marquis Xiao's heart sank. What Qin Feiyong said was not without reason. With the Imperial Preceptor's methods, if he knew that Qin Feiyong had come, he would definitely accuse him of colluding with Qin Feiyong and betraying him. At that time, no one would be able to save him, and no one would be able to save his daughter. With that thought in mind, Marquis Xiao looked at the maid, his eyes filled with killing intent. The maid panicked and grabbed the green-clothed woman's arm, saying, "Miss, save me, I don't want to die." The green-clothed woman looked at Marquis Xiao and said anxiously, "Father, I promise you she definitely won't speak carelessly." "Kai, you are still too naive. Even if we don't kill her now,
She will die at the hands of the Imperial Preceptor sooner or later. You can save her from us now, but in the future, can you save her from the Imperial Preceptor?
Marquis Xiao sighed.
The green-clothed woman stood in front of the maid and shook her head. No matter what, I won't allow you to kill her.
Marquis Xiao became angry and shouted,
Impudent, retreat immediately.
No.
The green-clothed woman shook her head. Marquis Xiao looked at the green-clothed woman, and a trace of helplessness gradually crept up in his eyes.
He looked at Qin Feiyong for help. Qin Feiyong's brows also tightened. A moment later,
Qin Feiyong sighed helplessly. Fine, I'll send her to a place where no one can hurt her.
Where?
Marquis Xiao asked. Inside my spatial divine object. But before we go, just in case, I still have to check her identity. After Qin Feiyong finished speaking, he took out a pill and threw it to the maid.
For now, I can only trouble you.
Marquis Xiao smiled apologetically at Qin Feiyong, looked at the maid and said, Hurry up and take the pill. Thank you, young Master Qin.
Thank you, young Master Qin, for not killing me.
The maid hurriedly stepped forward and bowed. She then grabbed the pill and put it into her mouth.
Finally,
the maid's face didn't change in the slightest.
Chapter 1404.
Bas. Just as Qin Feiyong was about to send the maid to the ancient pagoda, Marquis Xiao suddenly extended his hand and said, Wait.
What is it?
Qin Feiyong looked at him suspiciously. Marquis Xiao pondered for a moment, then raised his head to look at Qin Feiyong, cupped his hands and said, I have a presumptuous request.
Speak.
Qin Feiyong said. Marquis Xiao said, I want Kai'er to go to your space-time divine object. Qin Feiyong frowned. You have to be clear, this is not a shelter.
I know.
But now, the Imperial Tutor has his eyes on us. What if he makes a move on Kai'er?
I only have one daughter.
I don't want anything to happen to her, so I'm begging you.
Marquis Xiao bowed.
Qin Feiyong said, Then aren't you afraid that I will harm your daughter? You should know that I am not a good person either. Marquis Xiao laughed. Although you are indeed not a good person, but in front of righteousness, I still trust you. Qin Feiyong shook his head and smiled, then nodded. All right, I will agree to your request, but you have to agree to one of my requests. This can be considered a fair trade.
Speak. Marquis Xiao said.
Qin Feiyong said, I need you to convince the other Marquis to stand with me at the critical moment. Marquis Xiao was stunned and frowned. I'm afraid this is not an easy task. After all, everyone thinks that you killed His Majesty.
Do you believe it?
Qin Feiyong asked. Marquis Xiao didn't know how to answer. Qin Feiyong said, I can tell you clearly that the Emperor is not dead, nor is he imprisoned by me. Old Man Qin and the commander of the Kirin army are also insiders.
Marquis Xiao was dumbstruck.
I'll be more straightforward. Old Man Qin and the commander of the Kirin army are standing with me because they believe that I won't do anything to harm the great Qin Empire. Of course I won't force you. It's your freedom to believe it or not.
Qin Feiyong said lightly.
Marquis Xiao's eyes revealed a look of struggle. A moment later, he nodded fiercely and said, All right, I believe you. I will try my best to convince the other Martial Marquis.
Actually, it's not difficult to convince them.
The only thing you have to be careful of is that among these Martial Marquis, there might be a few who have already joined the Imperial Advisor.
Qin Feiyong said. I understand.
Marquis Xiao nodded.
Qin Feiyong said, All right then.
Now take out the image crystal and establish a contract bridge so that we can communicate more easily in the future. After establishing the contract bridge, Qin Feiyong disappeared with the Thunder Leopard, the three beasts, and the green-clothed woman.
Alas! Great Qin's future is worrying.
Marquis Xiao walked to the lakeside and looked at the sky. He let out a long sigh, and there was a hint of worry between his brows.
The ancient pagoda. Above the herb field. This is your spatial divine object? It's too big.
And this herb field, oh my God, how many medicinal herbs are there? Looking at the boundless mountains and rivers around them, as well as the boundless herb field, the two women in green were shocked.
Qin Feiyong smiled faintly and looked at the center of the herb field.
In the center of the herb field, beside the tree of good fortune, there was now a courtyard. The courtyard was about 100 feet long. Although it was not big and was very simple, it was very clean and neat.
At this moment, the old man, Luo Chenxue, Lu Ji, and Yan Nanshan were sitting around a stone table in the courtyard. The old man and Yan Nanshan sat opposite each other, playing chess and drinking tea. Lu Ji and Luo Chenxue sat at the side and watched. From time to time they would laugh. The four of them were equivalent to the owners of this herb field. They had built a courtyard here because they planned to stay here for a long time. Firstly, this place was very leisurely, quiet, and suitable for retirement. Secondly, it was convenient to manage the herb field so that Qin Feiyang would have no worries. Although their cultivation was not high, the people and beasts in the ancient pagoda knew about their relationship with Qin Feiyang, so they were very respectful. Moreover, whether it was Yan Wei's clansmen or Wang Yongfeng's clansmen, they had to get their permission in advance to pick medicinal herbs. Even the unruly 9-star emperor beasts like the thunder leopard, the seahorse, and the seal were quite polite to the four of them. Whoosh! Qin Feiyang stepped out and landed beside the four of them. He smiled and said, "You're living a good life. I can't help but envy you." Every time he saw the old man and the other three, he would feel a sense of closeness and belonging in his heart. "You're here." The four of them put down what they were doing and raised their heads to look at Qin Feiyang. Their faces were full of doting. As for Qin Feiyang, they also treated him like their own child. Qin Feiyang nodded. "Who are they?" Looking at the green-clothed woman and the maid who followed them, the four of them couldn't help but ask curiously. Qin Feiyang said, "She is the daughter of the Marquis of Shao, and the other is her maid." Yan Nanshan asked suspiciously, "What is the daughter of the Marquis of Shao doing here?" "Taking refuge. The Marquis of Shao has already been targeted by the imperial tutor, so she came to the ancient pagoda to hide." Qin Feiyang laughed. "So it's like that." The four of them suddenly realized. The green-clothed woman walked in front of the four of them and bowed obediently. Junior Xueqi greets the four seniors. The old man smiled and said, "Girl, since you're here, your family. Don't be too reserved." "All right." Seeing that the four of them were so amiable, Xueqi immediately let go and ran behind the old man with a smile, massaging his back and shoulders. The old man stared blankly for a moment before looking at Qin Feiyang with a face full of enjoyment. He chuckled and said, "This old man likes this little girl. Let her stay here and chat with us." Yan Nanshan, Luo Chenxue, and Lu Ji all nodded in agreement. "As long as you're happy," Qin Feiyang said. "It's so lively." Suddenly, a burst of laughter sounded out. Old Man Qin, Wang Yongfeng and the others flew through the air and landed in the courtyard. "Greetings, Old Man Qin." The four of them immediately stood up and bowed. Old Man Qin hurriedly waved his hands. No, you are all Qin Feiyang's elders, this old man really can't accept it." Keep pretending. Lei Bao and the other two beasts looked at him with disdain. "What this old man said is the truth. Why don't you believe me? Furthermore, this old man is living under someone else's roof, so I can't pretend even if I want to." Old Man Qin glanced at Qin Feiyang, shook his head and sighed, feeling a sense of loneliness like a tiger being bullied by a dog. What else could Qin Feiyang say about this? There was nothing he could say. He could only smile helplessly. In any case, as long as these old people were happy, it was fine. Old Man Qin is actually here too. Xueqi and the maid looked at each other and hurriedly went forward to bow. "You're here too. It seems that your father is still a reasonable person." Old Man Qin glanced at the maid and smiled at Xueqi. Xueqi said, "Junior doesn't dare to guarantee anything else, but Junior dares to guarantee father's loyalty to Great Qin with my life." This old man doesn't dare to believe your words, but this old man believes in Qin Feiyang's vision and judgment. Since he can bring you here, it means that there is no problem with Marquis Shao. Old Man Qin said. Xueqi glanced at Qin Feiyang. What kind of charm did this man have? Even Old Man Qin trusted him so much? Next, everyone gathered together and chatted happily. Lei Bao rolled his eyes and leaned over to Wang Yongfeng's side, whispering, "Old Wang, did you mention to him about opening the gate of potential?" The seal and seahorse also immediately went up. "Yes." Wang Yongfeng nodded. "Then how did he answer?" Lei Bao asked, looking rather nervous. "Sigh." Wang Yongfeng sighed. The others also lowered their heads, looking disappointed. Seeing this,
Lei Bao and the other two beasts also lowered their heads, their hearts filled with disappointment. But they didn't notice that when they lowered their heads, Wang Yongfeng and the others instantly had a look of ridicule on their faces. This bastard old man is too much.
Isn't that so? Now he's eating our food and living in our place.
He's not even willing to help us with a small favor.
No, I have to get Boss Qin to chase him out.
The three beasts were indignant. Just as they were about to rush towards Old Man Qin in anger, Wang Yongfeng's expression changed slightly, and he hurriedly sent a sound transmission. Don't mess around, we were just teasing you. He has already agreed to help us open the gate of potential.
Teasing us?
The three beasts were slightly stunned and immediately flew into a rage out of humiliation, glaring fiercely at the group of people.
At this moment,
Qin Feiyang smiled and said, "All right, you guys take your time to chat, I'll go take a look at my disciple." Although he liked the feeling of everyone gathering together to chat and laugh, he knew that he was not qualified to do so now. There were many things waiting for him to deal with.
You have a disciple?
Old Man Qin looked at him in surprise. Qin Feiyang said unhappily, "I'm at least a 4-star combat emperor now, what's wrong with accepting a disciple?" Old Man Qin said indifferently, "Nothing, I'm just worried that you'll lead others astray." When the old man and the others heard this, they couldn't help but laugh.
Qin Feiyang was helpless. Was he that bad?
Ignoring everyone's laughter, Qin Feiyang closed his eyes and quickly found Wang Xiaojie and Mu Chen.
Swoosh. Following closely.
Qin Feiyang opened his eyes and glanced at everyone, then concealed his aura, and with a flash, he instantly descended above a forest. In the forest, the bushes were overgrown, the weeds were dense, and there were berserk beasts everywhere. However, the cultivation of the berserk beasts here was not strong. They were basically between the warrior and the war emperor. Although these berserk beasts were nothing to Qin Feiyang, to Wang Xiaojie and Mu Chen, they were fatal existences.
At this moment,
the two of them were being chased by a few berserk beasts. Their hair was a mess and their bodies were covered in blood. They also emitted a stench, as if they were two beggars. Wang Xiaojie roared, "Ever since we were thrown here, we have been chased by berserk beasts all day long. When will these days end?"
What's the use of complaining? Hurry up and think of a way to deal with them. Otherwise, we'll all be finished today.
Mu Chen was relatively calmer. After all, he had experienced many things in the Mu family that Wang Xiaojie had never experienced. However, although they had been chased by berserk beasts during this period of time, their battle consciousness and courage were growing every day.
Shwa! Suddenly,
a figure rushed out from the forest and landed beside Qin Feiyang. He bowed and said, "Greetings, young master." This was a middle-aged man with the cultivation of an 8-star combat emperor.
You are?
Qin Feiyang was suspicious. The burly man said respectfully, "This subordinate is called Wang Yi. Under the orders of the ancestor, I am secretly protecting the two of them."
Chapter 1405.
Qin Feiyang nodded in realization and asked, "Then how have they been doing during this period of time?" Wang Yi looked down at the two and nodded with a smile. "They are all right, but Qin Chen's performance is better."
Qin Chen was Mu Chen. It was the name Qin Feiyang gave him. Tell me about it. Qin Feiyang was curious.
Regardless of whether it is Qin Chen's temperament or the way he handles things, they are all a level higher than Wang Xiaojie's. In addition, his cultivation is stronger than Wang Xiaojie's to begin with. Therefore, during this period of time, he has been taking care of Wang Xiaojie.
Wang Yi smiled. Qin Feiyang nodded. Qin Chen's experience was similar to his. He was poisoned by Mu Qing and became a cripple. After experiencing despair and pain, he finally broke out of his cocoon and became a butterfly.
So, in terms of temperament, Wang Xiaojie was definitely inferior.
Wang Yi smiled again.
Of course, Wang Xiaojie's situation is understandable. After all, he is still a young man and has just stepped onto the path of cultivation. It is difficult for him to accept so many things in such a short time. That's why I asked him to come with Qin Chen to temper himself. There is a good saying, a jade cannot be made into a treasure if it is not polished. Wang Xiaojie's talent is better than Qin Chen's. But if he is not polished, his future achievements may not be as good as Qin Chen's.
Qin Feiyang said.
Wang Yi clasped his hands.
Young master, you are too kind.
It is Wang Xiaojie's fortune to have you as his master. Qin Feiyang shook his head with a smile and said, "Continue watching them. But remember, don't help them until the last moment of your life."
Yes.
Wang Yi bowed and said, "Then how long are they going to train?"
Sharpness.
"I want to see sharpness in them that others of the same age do not before it is over," Qin Feiyang said and returned to the castle. Everyone was cultivating. Only Dan Wangkai and Fatso were organizing the treasures from the Zhuge family. Qin Feiyang stepped forward, looked at Dan Wangkai, and asked with a smile, "How many medicinal ingredients for the Great Creation Pill do we have now?"
A lot.
Dan Wangkai replied as he sorted out the items.
Can you make it clearer? Qin Feiyang rolled his eyes.
He also knew that there were many. This was because the Mu family's herbal field alone had a lot of herbs. But how many are there? One had to know. During this period of time, they had not only plundered the Mu family's medicinal fields, they had also plundered the medicinal fields cultivated by the Imperial Preceptor's descendants in the Sea of Reincarnation. And now, he had even ransacked the Zhuge family's treasury. Adding all of these together, it was definitely beyond imagination. Dan Wangkai stopped what he was doing, lowered his head and muttered to himself for a while. He then stood up and looked at Qin Feiyang, saying, "We've already gathered more than 100 sets of the Great Creation Pill's ingredients. However, we can only refine 33 Great Creation Pills at the moment."
So many?
Qin Feiyang was shocked. This was truly beyond his imagination.
Wait a minute.
We've already gathered more than 100 sets of ingredients. Why can we only refine 33 pills?
Qin Feiyang asked suspiciously.
Because we only have 33 fruits of creation, Dan Wangkai said. Qin Feiyang was stunned. Then a wry smile appeared on his face.
Yes.
Although they had the tree of creation, only the Mu family's tree of creation had 30 fruits of creation. The other tree of creation only had 3 fruits. The fruit of creation was the most important ingredient for the Great Creation Pill. Without the fruit of creation, it was impossible to refine the pill.
I've carefully checked the elixir.
According to the records, the tree of creation takes 100 years to bloom, 100 years to bear fruit, and 100 years to mature. In other words, the whole process will take a full 300 years. So, if we want to refine more Great Creation Pills, we have to find another fruit of creation. After all, 300 years is too long. We can't afford to wait. Dan Wangkai looked at Qin Feiyang and said.
Qin Feiyang nodded.
Apart from the Great Creation Pill, the ingredients for the Soul Concentrating Pill have been gathered for 30 portions. But the ingredients for the Spirit Concentrating Pill have only been gathered for 10 portions.
Dan Wangkai said. So little?
Qin Feiyang frowned. The Soul Concentrating Pill and the Spirit Concentrating Pill both have the effect of condensing the divine soul. But the difference is that the Soul Concentrating Pill is taken when breaking through to the pseudo-god realm, which is the early stage of condensing the divine soul. The Spirit Concentrating Pill is taken when breaking through to the war god realm. So in terms of grade, these two elixirs are a little higher than the Great Creation Pill. So the ingredients are also rarer than the Great Creation Pill. Dan Wangkai explained.
What about the 5 Elements Universe Pill?
Qin Feiyang asked. Hearing the 5 Elements Universe Pill, Dan Wangkai suddenly smiled bitterly. Although the 5 Elements Universe Pill is of the same level as the Great Creation Pill, the ingredients are rarer than the Spirit Concentrating Pill and the Soul Concentrating Pill. Because the essence of water, the essence of fire, the essence of wood, the essence of earth, and the essence of earth are all natural treasures that can only be found by chance.
Dan Wangkai sighed.
Qin Feiyang also smiled helplessly and said, "In fact, the 5 Elements Universe Pill is not that important. Anyway, we have opened the door of potential and the ancient castle is a cultivation artifact. We don't care about the benefits that the 5 Elements Universe Pill brings."
That's true.
The most important thing is the Great Creation Pill, the Soul Concentrating Pill, and the Spirit Concentrating Pill. Especially the Great Creation Pill, the door of everyone's potential must be opened. Dan Wangkai said. Qin Feiyang nodded and said, "After finishing the things at hand, go to the herb field and collect the ingredients for 21 portions of the Great Creation Pill and the Soul Concentrating Pill."
You need so much at once? What do you want to do?
Dan Wangkai was surprised and puzzled. Lei Bao and Wang Yongfeng have already stepped into the peak of the 9-star combat emperor realm. Before comprehending the profound meaning of becoming a god, I must help them open the door of potential. As for the soul concentrating pill, although they don't need it at the moment, I'll give it to them in advance. When they break through to the semi-god realm, they don't have to bother us anymore and can take it directly. Qin Feiyang said with a smile. Fatso, who had been burying his head in organizing the treasures, immediately looked up at Qin Feiyang and said with dissatisfaction, "Boss, you're too generous." Dan Wangkai also frowned. "I know what you're thinking. Right now, we can only refine 33 great creation pills and 30 spirit concentrating pills. Now we have to give out 21 pills. What will you do when you need them in the future?" "Is that so?" Qin Feiyang asked with a smile. The two did not deny it. Qin Feiyang shook his head and laughed. "Although Lei Bao, Old Wang and the others only decided to follow me later on, regardless of whether it might be you all or them, I treat you all equally. Now that they need it, I must give it to them first. After all, the stronger they are, the more help they will be to us. As for your future, don't worry, I will think of a way to find more herbs. In short, I promise you that before you break through to the semi-god realm, I will let all of you open the 8th level of the Gate of Potential. In addition, I'll make a solemn statement. We are now a big family. We should protect and understand each other. We can't be selfish." Qin Feiyang said. In fact, he could understand Fatso and Dan Wangcai's thoughts. After all, it was no longer the same as before. In the past, they were just a small team with few people. They didn't need to worry about the pills. And now, there were more than 1 million people in the ancient pagoda. Therefore, there was a situation where there were too many monks and too little porridge. Of course, Qin Feiyang had already expected this and had a plan to deal with it. Survival of the fittest. This was an unchanging law. No matter where, resources were usually tilted towards the winner. However, no matter how the fittest survived, he would not forget these people and beasts who had been following him and would take care of them first. Beasts such as the black dragon snake, the mountain pangolin, and the flood dragon did not contribute much to him compared to Wang Yongfeng and the others. Especially the black dragon snake. Ever since it followed Qin Feiyang, it had been cultivating in seclusion. But had Qin Feiyang ever given up on it? No. Not only did he not give up, as long as it was what the black dragon snake wanted, Qin Feiyang would satisfy it. This was Qin Feiyang's character. He cherished his comradeship and friendship very much. As long as you treated him sincerely, he would repay you 10 times, or even 100 times. Hearing Qin Feiyang's words, Fatso and Dan Wangkai both fell silent, with a hint of shame on their faces. Fatso looked at Qin Feiyang apologetically, and said, "Boss, I'm sorry, I was selfish, I promise I won't do it again." "Me too." Dan Wangkai lowered his head and said. Qin Feiyang laughed. "It's great to know your mistakes and be able to correct them." Seeing that Qin Feiyang did not look angry at all, the two of them secretly heaved a sigh of relief, and a smile crept onto their faces. "You guys go ahead." Qin Feiyang smiled, then walked to the front of the altar, opened the iron box, flipped open the 6-word divine formula, and continued to copy the Xing character formula. Actually, in terms of contribution, Dan Wangcai's contribution to Qin Feiyang was the greatest. Because ever since Dan Wangkai entered the castle, Qin Feiyang had basically never touched the pill furnace again. One had to know. With so many people and so many fierce beasts cultivating in the castle, the amount of pills they needed was not a small amount. Moreover, Qin Feiyang himself was copying the 6-word divine formula, which consumed even more battle Qi Dan. If not for Dan Wangcai's help, Qin Feiyang would definitely not have been able to concentrate on cultivating like he was now. Moreover, it was also because Dan Wangkai often refined pills that he delayed his cultivation. Originally, his cultivation was not as good as Dan Wangcai's, but now, he had surpassed Dan Wangkai. Therefore, Qin Feiyang was extremely grateful to Dan Wangkai. He would do his best to satisfy Dan Wangcai's requests. Time flew. The next day, Dan Wangkai and Fatso finally finished sorting out the treasures of the Zhuge family. Fatso directly entered a state of cultivation. Dan Wangkai went to the ancient tower to collect the medicinal ingredients for the Great Creation Pill and the Soul Concentrating Pill. After that, Qin Feiyang personally opened the furnace to refine pills, while Dan Wangkai assisted from the side. After all, Dan Wangcai's talent in alchemy was ultimately not as good as Qin Feiyang's. Whether it was the Great Creation Pill or the Soul Concentrating Pill, they were the same as the 9-turn Dragon Blood Pill and the Small Creation Pill. The more pill patterns there were, the higher the success rate. Therefore, Qin Feiyang had to personally refine them. However, even if Qin Feiyang personally refined them, he also wasted a portion of the Great Creation Pill and the Soul Concentrating Pill's medicinal ingredients. Because these two pills were too difficult to refine. Whether it was the heat or the technique, they all had to be done perfectly. After the refinement, Qin Feiyang was sweating profusely, to the point that water could be wrung out of his clothes. It was also because of the waste of a set of medicinal ingredients that there were only 11 complete sets of medicinal ingredients left for the Great Creation Pill and 8 complete sets of medicinal ingredients for the Soul Concentrating Pill. However, Dan Wangkai looked at Qin Feiyang with a face full of admiration. For such a difficult pill to refine, only one set of medicinal ingredients was wasted. His attainments in alchemy were truly astonishing. If it were him, he might not even be able to successfully refine a pill with 5 sets of medicinal ingredients.